Chapter 221, Talking Back to a Teacher. Hogwarts had, for the moment, slipped back into its usual calm. The Dementors had withdrawn, and the heavy, oppressive air around the castle was gone. Students' talk had turned from the shadow of black to Lockhart's ignominious capture and the dueling competition. Hermione Granger remained one of the busiest pupils in the place. She darted through corridors with a stack of books under her arm, hopping between classes and the library, squeezing every spare second out of the day, sometimes with the help of her time-turner. Divination, however, was another matter. Professor Trelawney's perpetually dim tower room was a torture chamber for Hermione's logical mind. That afternoon, Trelawney had the class peer into crystal balls and practice reading omens. "I have decided, slightly earlier than I planned, to reveal the mysteries of the crystal ball to you," Trelawney intoned from her chair by the flickering fireplace, voice deliberately mysterious. "The fates are whispering. They tell me this year's examinations will touch the realm of this profound orb. I hope to give you ample practice." Hermione snorted audibly, her mouth curving into a disdainful frown. "Oh, please." She folded her arms and spoke loud enough to carry through the smoky room. "The fates told me? Who sets the exam questions, yourself? What a convenient prophecy." Harry and Ron immediately ducked their heads, shoulders shaking as they tried to swallow the laughter bubbling up. The rest of the class fell silent, staring. Trelawney, whether genuinely unruffled or theatrically unaffected, showed no outward sign of offense. She leaned forward, eyes magnified behind her thick lenses. "Oh, my dear," she said softly, but the words cut. "Your mind is a blank, a very heavy mist. It shrouds your vision." She shook her beads like a small, ominous bell. Mist usually symbolizes confusion or uncertainty of the future, but such a complete blankness. "Miss Granger, I am sorry to tell you that you seem to possess no gift of inner sight. Your soul is too fixated on cold facts. It obstructs your connection to divination." Hermione felt color flood her cheeks. She could put up with Trelawney's vague pronouncements and the occasional suggestion that she lacked imagination, but being declared a blank, especially in front of everyone, stung. Frustration built until it burst. She shot up from her cushion so abruptly that a small tea table teetered. The crystal ball in its tray rocked dangerously. "No talent!" Hermione snapped, her voice hard and unusually sharp. "With all due respect, Professor, what I see is not mist or blankness. It's the refraction and scattering of light on the curved surface of the crystal ball. It's the Barnum effect, cold probability in psychology. It's baseless speculation and overinterpretation of vague symbols. There's no verifiable basis here that could be called knowledge." Silence fell like a curtain. Every pupil in the room stared at Hermione, breath held. Ron's jaw hung open. Harry looked stunned. No one had ever contradicted Trelawney so directly, let alone dismissed her subject so bluntly. Trelawney recoiled as if struck. Her hand flew to her chest, her face paling. Through her thick lenses, her eyes seemed enormous, filled with a mixture of hurt and fury. You dare." "Why not?" Hermione shot back, meeting her gaze. "Did your inner eye not foresee that I would say this?" The words kept flowing, faster now. "Isn't this the perfect moment to practice? Professor, predict for me now. Will I continue wasting time in this class, or will I leave?" "That is sacrilege," Trelawney cried, her voice high and trembling. "I will not." Trelawney's speech dissolved into a tirade. "So narrow-minded, so arrogant. You are blinded, completely blinded, by your pathetic, narrow intellect. Get out, Miss Granger. Leave my classroom at once." "That's exactly what I intend to do." Hermione gathered her books and quill with brisk, determined movements. "I refuse to squander my time on meaninglessness." She turned her back on the tower, leaving Trelawney's muttered lament, inner sight blocked, pathetic, drowned by the echo of the staircase. Sunlight hit her in the corridor, and she inhaled as if the fresh air were a remedy. Her exit had been impulsive and might bring trouble later, but she felt no regret, only relief. She would spend her time on knowledge that changed things, practical magic that could protect her and her friends, rather than on guesses and theatrics. She strode toward the library, leaving Trelawney and the dim room far behind. Descending the North Tower spiral, she almost collided with Argus Filch in a narrow corridor. He was hunched over a pile of sodden slack mops and rags, grumbling. Madame Norris sat nearby, tail flicking. "Damn things," Filch rasped. He kicked at the cleaning tools, then gave up. Out of magic again. They used to last a week at least. He muttered some half-hearted incantations at the mops, but without wand work they lay limp on the stone. Hermione had meant to pass without stopping, but she couldn't help noticing the faint traces of enchantment clinging to the handles, the remnants of an animation charm. She stepped closer, sympathy softening her motion. "Mr. Filch," she said politely, still flushed from the earlier confrontation, "the enchantment on these is fading. They need recharging." She drew her wand and tapped a place on a mop's handle where the old charm lingered. A pale white spark flared, the mop straightened, stiffened, and resumed scrubbing with brisk energy. Filch stared, a complicated expression passing over his face. "Oh, yes," he mumbled, voice thick. Hermione touched a rag and a dim light flickered there too. It twitched and began to wring itself out. Watching the cleaning tools take up their work again, lines of wariness around Filch's mouth eased just a little. Hermione turned to leave, but Filch's voice, unusually low and hesitant, stopped her. "Hermione Granger, do you know if Professor Lumina, will she come back? I mean, back to Hogwarts?" There was a small, cautious hope in his eyes that made him look less like a resentful caretaker and more like someone who had once trusted the routine of the school. Hermione thought of the rumors about the Defense Against the Dark Arts curse and of the circumstances that had sent Professor Lumina away. She shook her head gently. "I don't know, Mr. Filch, but I don't think Professor Lumina will be returning." The light in Filch's face dimmed. He stared at the now busy mops and rags, and then murmured, "Oh, well, I suppose not." His shoulders drooped further, and he resumed his stooped posture, looking smaller and more alone than Hermione had ever seen him. Hermione stopped talking and walked toward the library, clutching her books to her chest. When she pushed open the heavy door, the familiar smell of parchment and old leather calmed her taut nerves. She headed straight for her usual window seat, only to find someone already there, Professor Sagres. He was standing on a small stool, comparing a thick tome with a thinner volume he held in his hand. Hermione's steps faltered. Her face warmed at the memory of the scene in divination. The argument with Professor Trelawney still left her feeling a little rattled. Sagres seemed to notice her entrance. He turned, and those steady gray eyes met hers, eyes that always seemed to see more than they let on. He closed the book in his hands and spoke in a soft, low voice. "Miss Granger, Locatus mentioned, you finished your class in the North Tower early?" There was no accusation in his tone, only a gentle understanding. "How did you know, Professor?" Hermione asked, surprised. Sagres smiled. "Locatus has been searching for something in the castle recently." Hermione nodded and, wisely, didn't press the matter. Her face flushed again, stubbornness and embarrassment mixing together, and she hurried out an explanation. "Yes, Professor. I had a disagreement with Professor Trelawney. I think divination lacks empirical basis. It feels like a waste of time." She could feel her voice tighten as she recalled the argument. Sagres listened without surprise. He stepped down from the stool, motioned to an empty oak table, and invited her to sit. "Divination," he said calmly, "is a discipline that depends far more on innate sight than on study. It's an elusive faculty, not something everyone can cultivate by sheer effort. True seers like those in Professor Trelawney's lineage are very rare." He looked at her openly. "For most people, myself included, hours spent parsing tea leaves, reading runes, or interpreting stars will often yield less than the same time applied to fields that can be learned systematically and rationally." He patted the heavy book in his hand. "You don't believe in those prophecies, either?" Hermione was a little taken aback. She had expected a senior wizard to show more reverence for the mysterious. Sagres shook his head, a faint smile at one corner of his mouth. "I believe fate has a course, but I don't trust vague prophecies. I prefer to seize the present and shape the future through knowledge and effort. Prophecies, if they exist, are often obscure and misleading. They can become shackles. Without that innate sight, obsessing over divination can indeed be pointless." He met Hermione's eyes with a kindly, almost avuncular look. "So leaving a course that frustrates you is not weakness. It's sensible. Hogwarts has many other areas that would benefit from your passion and intellect." Sagres' words were like cool water on the last stubborn embers of doubt left by her decision to drop the class. His view mirrored her own, and she felt reassured. "Thank you, Professor," she said earnestly, the knot of unease finally easing. Sagres inclined his head. "Your time is precious. Pursuing a meaningless set of OOLs just for the sake of it is wasteful." As he spoke, another book, thick enough to be used as a shield, floated gently down from a tall shelf and settled into his palm. He shifted the subject and handed it to her. "You're well read, Miss Granger," he said, "but breadth without depth can only take you so far. With a deep understanding of magical principles, you can reach the threshold of creation." Hermione took the book and blinked. It was the very textbook every Hogwarts first-year purchase, Magical Theory. "You mean creating my own spells?" she asked, incredulity and excitement in her voice. "That's possible?" "Why not?" Sagres looked at her as if it were obvious. "Professor Snape created spells when he was a student." Hermione's voice rose a degree. "Professor Snape?" "Indeed," Sagres nodded. "Leaving aside opinions of his character, Professor Snape is a genuine genius in charms and potions." Before Hermione could ask more, a cold voice sliced through the hush of the stacks. "You are an arrogant and conceited fellow." Snape materialized from the shadows between bookshelves, clutching a grim-covered volume. His face matched the book, severe and implacable. He had clearly overheard Sagres's remark about leaving character aside. "Is there a problem with my character then, Sagres?" Snape hissed. "Not at all," Sagres replied with a flawless smile. Madame Pince, having detected the disturbance, peered briefly around a distant shelf. Her sharp gaze swept over them twice, a silent admonishment. Snape snorted, flung his robe, and stalked away. Only after the black-robed professor disappeared behind the stacks did Sagres turn back to Hermione, his tone softening and a trace of mischief in it. "What I meant was that Professor Snape and I were closely acquainted when I was a student. He took an interest in my studies." Hermione couldn't help it. A small, surprised chuckle escaped her. She covered her mouth, shoulders trembling with suppressed amusement. When she'd composed herself, she looked down at the other book Sagres had been holding, curiosity written over her face. "Professor, what is that?" He let his gaze fall to the tome. "A compendium on transfiguration in ancient ritual magic," he said, a hint of regret coloring his words. "Many of the core materials it references have been lost. Suitable substitutes are scarce." Hermione mirrored his regret with a quiet nod. Sagres said no more. He steadied the heavy volume in his hands, inclined his head to her, and turned deeper into the labyrinth of shelves, still hunting for any remaining clues among the library's hidden corners. Chapter 223, The Marauder's Map. The second Hogsmeade weekend arrived quickly, and the castle thrummed with excitement. Everywhere students chattered about Honeyduke's new sweets, the Three Broomsticks butterbeer, and the latest pranks from Zonkos. Harry felt a little lighter than last time, but the old loneliness settled over him again as he watched groups of friends heading for the gate. To his surprise, Ron and Hermione didn't join them. They came straight over. Ron scratched at his hair and tried to sound casual. "Hey, Harry, actually, there's nothing great about Hogsmeade. Percy was right about one thing. It's overrated, and too much candy gives you a toothache." Hermione nodded vigorously, clutching a stack of thick books to her chest in a very poor attempt to look studious. "Exactly. I've got essays to finish. The library is much quieter." Harry looked at them, at their awkward, earnest faces, and warmth flooded him until his eyes prickled. He knew they'd given up the trip to stay with him. It touched him deeply and made him feel guilty at the same time. "Thanks," he said, voice thick. "But you don't have to do this. You should go. I can go to Hagrid's or—" "Don't be daft, Harry," Hermione said, firm. "We're fine." Just then, two identical heads peered out from behind a corridor pillar, grins spreading across both faces, Fred and George. They strolled over, imitating Percy's solemn air. "Greetings, poor prisoners." Fred laughed, clapping Harry on the shoulder. "And two loyal warders." George made a dramatic bow to Ron and Hermione. "Why aren't you two going to Hogsmeade?" Ron asked, raising an eyebrow. "Oh, us?" Fred said, mysterious. "We haven't left yet. We can go whenever we like," George added with a flourish. "No need for Hogsmeade weekend. No need for anyone's permission." "So why are you standing here, then?" Ron asked, puzzled. Fred leaned conspiratorially toward them. "A brilliant prank sometimes needs a special tool." George produced, with an exaggerated flourish, a square of old parchment from his pocket. It looked blank and worn. "Harry," he said solemnly as he held it out, lowering his voice, "after much debate, we agreed you'd be the one who needs it most right now," Fred finished. "It's time to entrust it to you." George grinned. "Consider it an early Christmas present." Harry took the parchment. "What's this? Just an old scrap?" "It's not just any scrap." George shook his head, proud as if unveiling a relic. "It's our secret to always getting away with things." Fred's eyes shone. "Our guide to all-night wanderings." George added, almost reverently, "the Weasleys' treasure." "The Marauder's map," they announced together. "The Marauder's map?" Harry, Ron, and Hermione stared. "You'll see," Fred winked. "George, show them." "Course." George took his wand, tapped the parchment, and said, loud and clear, "I solemnly swear that I am up to no good." Ink appeared on the paper as if by magic, flowing and spelling itself out into fine, intricate lines. A detailed map of Hogwarts spread across the parchment: corridors, rooms, secret passages. Tiny footprints dotted the halls, little names crawled along with them. Snape stood still in the dungeons. Filch and Madame Norris prowled the third-floor corridor. Dumbledore paced in the headmaster's office. Harry, Ron, and Hermione gaped. "It's incredible," Hermione breathed, forgetting all about essays and Hogsmeade. "A powerful piece of magic." Fred pointed at a tangle of lines. "See? All the secret passages. There's one under the Humping Willow, don't know where it comes out. One behind the one-eyed witch statue that leads straight to the Honeyduke's cellar, and loads more." He rattled off secrets only the Marauders could have known. "We figured, since you can't go to Hogsmeade, Harry, you're the one who should have it." "You kept something like this from me? I'm your brother," Ron protested. "Exactly why we couldn't trust you with it, little Ronnie," Fred said, slinging an arm around Ron's shoulders. "We'd never hear the end of it if you used it for trouble." George winked. Ron went sulky. Harry was still staring at the map when a name made him frown. He pointed. "This can't be right. Look, Sirius Black's name is on here." "What?" The others leaned in. Hermione's brow tightened as she traced the ink. The map showed Professor Lupin's office, and next to Lupin's name another dot moved slowly. The label beside it read, stark and unmistakable. Sirius Black. Fred and George's grins evaporated. Fred's voice went flat. The map never lies, Harry." "That's impossible," Harry blurted. "He's dead. The papers said so. His body was taken by the Ministry. Didn't you all read?" A cold wave ran through them, as if someone had opened a window to winter. Hermione clapped a hand over her mouth. Her mind raced. Staged death? A plot? Or was the map wrong? But the other names were correct and where they should be. A memory pushed up through her fear. Professor Sagres saying he'd been searching the castle lately. What if what he'd been searching for was him? Sirius Black? Had someone known he wasn't dead? They stood around the map in silence, every hair on their arms prickling, staring at the tiny ink dot that moved as if nothing had happened in the world outside. The parchment had opened a door that no headline could explain. Chapter 224, Ron's Breakdown. "Where is Professor Greengrass now?" Hermione forced herself to sound calm, though her voice trembled as she scanned the map. He's near the greenhouses." Ron pointed to the blot of ink representing the herbology greenhouses. The name Sagres Greengrass moved there. "We need to find him," Hermione snapped, sharp with fear. "We have to tell him Black's in the castle. He's in Professor Lupin's office right now." "Hermione's right," Ron agreed at once. "We need to tell an adult." Harry wanted to run straight there, but some small scrap of reason held him back. The five of them huddled together, nervously confirming Sagres' location on the Marauder's map. In the corner of Hermione's eye, a tiny ink blot caught her attention. Not far above the corridor they stood in, another name was marked. Locatus. "Wait, Locatus?" Hermione looked up abruptly, following the map's direction toward the high, stone-arched ceiling. The others followed her gaze. In the shadow of one of the towering gargoyles, a raven sat, black eyes fixed unblinkingly on them and on the spread map in their hands. "Merlin's smelly socks!" Fred and George shrieked in unison, faces dropping as if the world had ended. "It's over. It saw it. It definitely saw it. The map's going to be confiscated." Locatus tilted its head and made a faint clicking sound, a signal of some kind. A moment later, just a few steps away from them, the air rippled like water. Sagres Greengrass stepped forward from the shimmer and stood before them. He glanced at the panic-stricken twins, then at the hastily folded Marauder's map. "Professor, Sirius Black is at Hogwarts. He's in Professor Lupin's office," Hermione blurted out. Sagres did not look surprised. The raven beat its wings once and settled on his shoulder, its black eyes still on the students. "Yes," he said quietly, holding out his hand. Fred and George, pale as ghosts, handed the map to him. Sagres's long fingers traced the map's worn edges. For a moment, his gray eyes shone with something like recognition. "An exquisitely made magical object," he said softly, "one that peeks into other people's privacy and movements." He looked at Fred and George with something like pity as they avoided his gaze. Then he took out his wand and pointed it at the parchment. "I solemnly swear that I am up to no good." The map woke with the same chaotic living script, ink trails, names, shifting footprints. Sagres's eyes skimmed it and pinned down Lupin's office. The blot labeled Sirius Black was still there. He didn't seem shocked, only resigned. "There's no need to hide it," he told them. "Come with me." He strode toward the defense office without another word. Loquetus flew off his shoulder and vanished down the corridor to alert the headmaster and the other professors. The five exchanged puzzled looks and followed Sagres without daring to hesitate. Lupin's office door was closed. Sagres knocked, then pushed it open. The room was dim, smelling faintly of herbs and old books. Lupin looked at the students with puzzled curiosity. His eyes drifted to the huge black dog lying by the fire. He seemed to understand before anyone else spoke. "Change back, Black," Sagres said to the dog. "They all know." The black dog shuddered and folded in on itself, changing shape. Where the dog had been stood a man, the same gaunt figure who had burst into the great hall days before. He looked exhausted and hollowed, but the wildness and despair were gone from his eyes, replaced by a complicated expression of nervous anticipation. Sirius Black tensed, his gray eyes locking on Harry's face, as if drawing strength from a face so like James's. Harry's breath stopped. Anger and a sick, miserable fury churned inside him. Sagres's words, "There's no need to hide it," still hung in the air. Had more been hidden? Sirius's voice was dry as he began to speak, telling what had been buried for years. The students' faces changed in the dim light, shock, doubt, pity passing through them. But the rawest reaction came from Ron. "You mean?" Ron's voice came out as if torn from his chest. "Scabbers, my Scabbers, killed Harry's parents?" Sirius's expression did not soften. "That's right, your pet rat Scabbers, you've had him for years, is Peter Pettigrew." "No," Ron let out a sound like a struck animal and recoiled. "Impossible. Scabbers is just a rat, an ordinary rat. He couldn't be an animagus." Professor Greengrass looked at Ron, pity in his eyes. "An ordinary rat doesn't live for over 10 years, Mr. Weasley." Sirius added, cold and relentless, "And do you remember his missing front paw?" "Peter Pettigrew was blasted by Black. Only one finger remained," Harry murmured, as if confirming what they had all been told in passing. Around them, silence fell heavy. Fred and George exchanged a glance and then, with awkward hesitation, spoke. Ron," Fred began. Didn't you sometimes call him Peter Pettigrew as a joke?" "What?" Ron looked up, bewildered. "Of course not. Why would I name him that? His name is Scabbers." The twins faltered, struggling for words. "What exactly are you trying to say?" Ron snapped, irritation and confusion sharpening his tone. "Peter Pettigrew has been with you since you started Hogwarts. And he's slept on your bed for almost 2 years, George finished, voice low. "We always thought." Fred's sentence broke off, swallowed by the room. The color drained from Ron's face. He froze, lips trembling, utterly speechless. "You always knew?" He managed at last, disbelief and betrayal colliding. "But you never told me?" Chapter 225, Peter Pettigrew. So his death was only an elaborate ruse? The point was to flush out the real traitor, Peter Pettigrew? Hermione demanded, pointing at the gaunt Sirius Black by the fireplace. "Exactly," Sagres said. Harry looked up, eyes conflicted, staring at the hollowed man whose face held pain, hope, and a humbled plea. The shock left his thoughts in turmoil. Someone else had betrayed his parents, and a man who had been imprisoned for 12 years. Could he have been falsely accused? Before Harry could sort it out, Dumbledore and the other professors hurried in. Snape swept his gaze across the room and paused on Black, openly disgusted. "What do you want with us, Sagres?" he asked bluntly. Of course, Sagres said, and held the Marauder's map out for everyone to see. Remus Lupin and Black both raised their eyebrows the moment they saw the parchment and exchanged a complicated look. They recognized it. Sagres spread the map fully and tapped it with his wand. The parchment lit up, revealing Hogwarts' layout and a tangle of moving ink names. This map shows the true locations and names of everyone in the castle. Most importantly, it can't be fooled by an ordinary disillusionment charm or an animagus form. The professors crowded closer, curiosity plain on their faces. "You mean," Professor McGonagall said hoarsely, "we can use it to find Peter Pettigrew?" "Already found him," Sagres replied. He pointed with his wand to a tiny ink dot shifting in the Gryffindor Tower common room. Next to it, a name that tightened every eye in the room read, in small, unmistakable letters, Peter Pettigrew. The air went cold. In the warm, cluttered Gryffindor common room, a fat gray rat was wriggling out from a gap under a sofa. He, Scabbers, had just finished swallowing a few stolen breadcrumbs and was contentedly belching. Safe, finally safe, he thought, feeling triumphant. Black was dead, killed by that terrifying Greengrass. Hogwarts had returned to peace, and his days of fear and hiding were over. A few days of theft and comfort had plumped him back up. Squeezed out from under the sofa, he planned to play the part of a lost and lucky rat when the students returned from Hogsmeade. Ron will be overjoyed and give me twice the treats, he mused. I'll be Scabbers, the pet at a ministry official's house. Perfect cover. I'll wait for my master to come back. He shook dust from his fur and, planning to slip back toward Ron's dormitory, turned. His blood froze. Every movement stilled. The entrance to the common room was filled. People had come and stood there without him noticing, like a nightmare closing in. Sagres stood nearest the door, his cold gray eyes fixed on the rat. Behind him were Dumbledore, McGonagall, Snape, Flitwick, Sprout, Remus Lupin, all the professors he feared, and Harry, Ron, Hermione, the Weasley twins, and the supposedly dead Sirius Black stared at him without expression. Peter's little rat heart hammered. Exposed? No, impossible. He was only a rat, a perfectly ordinary rat. Panic pushed him into a shrill series of squeaks. He scrambled to Ron's feet, the only lifeline he could imagine. Squeak! Squeak! But he didn't get close. Sagres raised his wand, and an irresistible force seized the rat's fat body. No! His squeaks turned into a human scream as the rat convulsed. Swollen flesh rippled, bones cracked like dry wood, and his fur receded as if pulled away. In seconds, the rat collapsed into a splayed, filthy heap of a man on the carpet, Peter Pettigrew, the traitor who had been presumed dead for years. He lay there trembling, his fat face blotched and teary. Despair slammed into him. Then the old poisonous instinct to survive crawled back. If people could believe Sirius Black, why not him? He had deceived people for over a decade. Why stop now? He began to weave fresh lies even as they stood over him. "Hello, Peter. Long time," Remus said first, but there was no joy in it. "Remus." Peter's voice was thin and high. He looked past Remus toward the door. "My friend, my old friend." "Yes," Remus said. "We've heard things about you. Want to hear what they are?" "No one's going to kill you until we get some answers," Remus added gently, and Peter seized on the plea. "You can't believe him, can you, Remus? Sirius wants to kill me. You mustn't listen to him. He's dangerous. He escaped Azkaban by using dark magic. He learned tricks from the one who must not be named," Peter cried. Black's laugh was sharp and empty. "Lord Voldemort taught me tricks? Me?" Peter flinched at the name. "Scared to hear your old master's name?" Black continued. "Think I'm Voldemort's lackey? How dare you? I never fawned for protection, unlike you. You were always looking for powerful friends. At school it was James, Remus, and me. Later you found the Dark Lord." "Believe me, Harry," Black said, turning to Harry with a hoarse voice. "I never betrayed James and Lily. I'd rather die than betray them." Harry's throat tightened. He couldn't immediately respond. He gave a small nod. He had wanted to believe Black, which was why Peter had lived as a rat for so long. Seeing Harry nod, Peter's eyes filled with tears. He crawled toward Harry on all fours, voice shrill and full of contrition. "Harry, for James and Lily's sake, I was forced. Voldemort. He threatened me. I had no choice. I was protecting you all along. Forgive me. Please forgive me." His hands scrabbled for Harry's trousers. Harry stepped back, eyes hard and cold. He felt only disgust and revulsion. He could not imagine his parents' killers looking like this. When Peter saw Harry unmoved, he crawled to Remus, even more pitiful. "Remus, my brother, we were the Marauders, brothers. Spare me, I was wrong. I'll do anything. Don't kill me." Remus shut his eyes, pale, trying to hold something back. The word brother from Peter's mouth made him sick. Peter turned to Ron next. "Ron, good boy, kind boy. I've been your scabbers for years. Think of all I've done for you. Tell them I didn't mean it. I'm only a poor rat." Ron's face twisted. He couldn't look. The idea of having shared a bed with the traitor who helped kill Harry's parents made him physically ill. He simply turned his head away. Desperate, Peter lunged at McGonagall. "Professor McGonagall, you're strict but fair. I was wrong. I'll confess. I'll go to Azkaban. Don't kill me. Give me a chance to reform." McGonagall recoiled, disgust plain on her face. Peter dropped to his knees before Dumbledore. "Professor Dumbledore, kind, tolerant, spare me. If you say the word, they'll all agree. Don't let them kill me." Dumbledore's blue eyes shone with sorrow and long-suffering compassion, but he only pressed his lips together and remained silent. Finally, he saw Snape and clutched at the last straw. "Severus, we both used to serve the Dark Lord. For old time's sake, help me. Talk to the headmaster. Don't let them kill me. We're on the same side." Snape's face hardened into frost. Contempt and disgust flashed in his dark eyes as if Peter had physically revolted him. His voice was hoarse. "Stop your disgusting act, Peter. Beg someone else." "Someone else," Peter faltered, then turned to Professor Sprout and Professor Flitwick. "Professor Flitwick, Professor Sprout, save me. I was your student. I'm not bright, but I'm honest and pitiable, surely." Flitwick looked away and Sprout sighed without speaking. "Oh no." Peter knelt before the Weasley twins. "For the sake of all these years, have mercy." They averted their eyes. He crawled to Hermione and tried to grab her robe, whimpering, "Lovely girl, clever girl, you won't let them kill me, will you? You're so clever, please." Hermione pulled free and stepped back, shaken. At last, Peter fixed on Sagres in black. "Powerful wizard, Sagres, you have unmatched strength. Spare me and I'll be your servant for life. Say the word and they'll let me go. Say you'll spare me." Sagres looked at him without a word. "Why don't you beg me, Peter?" Black said coldly. "Afraid I'd forgive you?" "Oh, serious." Peter crawled forward begging, hands clasped at his chest as if in prayer. "My friend, there's been some misunderstanding between us. You'll forgive me, won't you? I've been your loyal friend. You wouldn't let me die, would you?" Sirius kicked him aside. Peter flinched. "Don't touch me. My robes are filthy enough," he snapped. Peter collapsed into a shaking, sniveling heap on the carpet. He looked up at every face and found only coldness, disgust, and scorn. No sympathy, no hesitation. His fawning had failed. The common room was utterly silent, except for his desperate gasps. Then Sirius Black stepped forward. His voice, unusually calm and utterly resolute, cut through the silence. "Let's kill him." Remus Lupin, usually gentle to a fault, met Sirius's eyes. For the first time that evening, his tired kindness hardened into steady resolve. Without hesitation, he replied in one clipped word. "Good." Chapter 226, Fudge, Are You Trying to Make Me Look Like a Fool? Sirius Black's wand was already raised, and Remus Lupin had his hand on his own. Peter Pettigrew lay prostrate on the floor, his sobs reduced to ragged, terrified gasps. "Wait!" A firm voice cut through the stifling silence. Everyone looked up in surprise. It was Harry. His expression was complicated, but he planted himself between Black and Lupin, facing the fury in their eyes. "Harry?" Sirius's wand faltered. He stared at Harry, disbelief and pain in his face. "He betrayed James and Lily. He made us." "I know," Harry snapped, cutting him off. "I know he deserves to die. I hate him more than anyone. But—" He took a steadying breath and forced himself to be calm. His gaze swept over the professors, then fixed on Sirius. "But we can't just kill him here. Sirius," he said awkwardly, "if you kill him now, you'll be a murderer on the run for the rest of your life. People will remember you only as a traitor. They'll never know the truth." Sirius trembled. Harry pushed on, each word deliberate. "We have to take him to the ministry. We have to let everyone see the truth. Only then can you have a real chance at freedom. Only then can you live with your head held high instead of forever being a fugitive." The common room was silent, save for Peter's panicked sobs. Lupin inhaled and slowly let his shoulders drop. Relief and approval swam in his eyes, pride too at what the son of his old friend had done. He lowered his wand. "Harry," Sirius's voice was hoarse, He took a step forward as if to embrace Harry, then stopped. He stood very still, looking Harry in the eye before bowing his head. "You have more courage than any of us. Harry, I don't deserve it. And Peter doesn't either." Peter, who had been curled up and resigned to death, suddenly grabbed at that tiny lifeline as if it were a plank. He scrambled toward Harry on all fours, tears and mucus streaking his face, his voice thin and high. Harry, kind Harry, you're right, you can't kill me. I can testify. I can tell everyone. Tell the ministry. Black is innocent. I was forced. I'll repent. I'll go to Azkaban for 100 years. 1,000. He babbled then, as if struck by a brilliant idea. His beady eyes gleamed with a sickly light. Or, I'll stay a rat forever. I'll never turn back into a man. I'll be Ron's best pet. No, everyone's good pet. I'll be very good, obedient. I'll never do anything bad again. Please, let me be a rat. I promise I'll be a good rat. The fawning was nauseating. Sirius sneered. "If you're better off as a rat than as a man, Peter, that's the real shame," he said coldly. Peter froze as if slapped. "Justice will be done," said Dumbledore's gentle voice, breaking the tension. He stepped forward, his eyes sweeping the room before resting on Sirius. "This is not only for Sirius, but for all those harmed by Peter Pettigrew's lies." He turned to Harry. "You have shown bravery and wisdom that rise above hatred. This is not an easy thing." Then to the others, "Please secure Peter and keep him from making any more moves. I will write to Minister Cornelius Fudge at once." "Severus, prepare some veritaserum," Dumbledore said. "We will need irrefutable proof for the minister. And Sagres," he added, "help keep a close watch on Peter." The professors moved quickly. Dumbledore returned to his office, selected a sheet of parchment and a pen, and sat at the small table by the fire. His pen flew as he wrote. "Dear Cornelius, regarding the case of Sirius Black, an extremely significant development has occurred. We have found conclusive evidence that the true betrayer of the Potters and the cause of the explosion that killed the Muggles was not Black, but Peter Pettigrew. Pettigrew hid for many years in his animagus form and has just been unmasked and apprehended at Hogwarts." Bang! Fudge slammed Dumbledore's missive onto his desk. He trembled with fury. "Preposterous!" he barked. His face flushed, went ashen, then green, then an ugly purplish black. He leapt up and began to stride the office like a trapped animal, waving the letter and spitting as he thundered. "Black isn't dead? Peter is the traitor? What about the articles I had printed? The reassurances I gave the public? Am I to be made a fool by Dumbledore? By Hogwarts?" He snatched a copy of the Daily Prophet from his desk, stared at his own smiling picture, and remembered how he'd paraded Black's death and praised Sagres' supposed heroics and his own wise leadership. White-hot humiliation flooded him. He crumpled the newspaper and hurled it against the wall. He had gone to great lengths to explain Black's disappearance with the story that the body had been cremated, to burnish the ministry's image, and now Dumbledore demanded he undo it all. Not only would he have to admit that Sirius was alive, he would have to concede that the ministry had arrested the wrong man, that a supposed hero who was awarded the Order of Merlin, First Class, had actually been the traitor. Order of Merlin, First Class, given to a traitor? "This is the biggest scandal the ministry has ever faced," he shrieked. "My political career." He grabbed a silver inkwell and flung it at the wall. Black ink splattered everywhere. "What a disgrace! What a disgrace!" he roared, sending anything fragile in reach crashing to the floor. Fury was followed by a hollow fatigue. Collapsing into his chair, Fudge covered his face with his hands. Dumbledore's letter was not a request, but a declaration with witnesses, Hogwarts staff. The evidence would be damning. Attempting to delay or hide it would only make things worse. If Dumbledore made the truth public, Fudge would be finished. Admitting the error, humiliating though it might be, was the least disastrous option. "Rufus," he barked into the intercom, his voice raw. "Get Dolores Umbridge to my office, wherefore. Now, send the most elite escort to Hogwarts." He let the intercom fall silent and stared at the chandelier above him as if 10 years had been added to his life. He needed time to plan damage control, how to frame this as an investigation error, how to make the ministry look brave for correcting its mistake. He rubbed his temples irritably. First things first, he had to get ahead of Dumbledore's announcement or at least coordinate its release. Then, he picked up his quill with trembling hands and began drafting the statement that might salvage the remainder of his career. Chapter 227. Don't Ask, It's Talent. Coldstone threw distorted shadows in the flickering torchlight. Deep inside Hogwarts, an unused classroom had been turned into a makeshift cell. Peter Pettigrew lay slumped in a corner like a lump of mud. Custom restraining shackles bit into his wrists and ankles, a faint blue glow pulsing weakly in the dim room. His eyes were hollow, his body trembled, a pathetic, ragged thing. The door creaked open. Sagres stepped in silently. His gray eyes looked bottomless in the torchlight. He regarded Peter as if looking at a pebble. Peter's fat body recoiled, trying to press itself into the cold stone wall. What are you going to do?" His voice was thin and whiny. "You can't. The Ministry must try me. Dementors. The Ministry's trial and the Dementor's kiss are what you deserve, Peter." Sagres' voice was flat, stating a fact. "But fudge is useless, and Azkaban isn't foolproof," he continued. "A wizard driven to desperation, and a rat like you who can take the shape of a rat, might find a crack and slip through." He looked at Pettigrew with cold scrutiny. "Even if the chance is tiny, I won't tolerate it." Peter's beady eyes went wide with panic. "No, you can't. Dumbledore won't. He won't let you kill me." "Kill you?" Sagres shook his head, contempt in his eyes. "No, I won't kill you." He raised his right hand. The tip of his wand hovered a breath from Peter's forehead. An invisible force bound Peter instantly. Not a finger could move. "But to be absolutely certain, you need to lose some unnecessary capital." Peter screamed. "Stop! What do you think you're doing? You can't! I deserve a trial." "This is the trial." His scream cut off into a ragged shriek as convulsions racked him. Peter thrashed like a shrimp plunged into boiling water, his plump face contorted in a pain far worse than any physical blow. Something invisible clawed at him, stripping more than skin. Something in his blood and soul was being drawn out. Even the thought of the Cruciatus Curse couldn't match it. His innate magic surged wildly toward Sagres' wand as if trying to break free. The ordeal lasted less than a minute, but for Peter it stretched like an eternity. When it ended, his eyes were vacant, dulled to something like a shell. Not just his magic, but his slyness and his very vitality had been sucked away. He collapsed to the floor, chest heaving with weak, meaningless groans. The ocean of power that had once filled him was now a shallow puddle. He couldn't even cast a lumos. "You're very lucky," Sagres said, looking down without pity. "I left you a trace." Even so, what remained of Pettigrew's magic was negligible, closer to a painful reminder than a gift. "You can now wait for the Dementor's kiss. They should enjoy the emptiness and despair left in your soul." Sagres turned and left. The heavy oak door closed and locked behind him, shutting the darkness and the ruined creature inside. After absorbing 90% of Peter's magic, Sagres felt the torrent inside him pass some critical threshold. It was deep into the night. Hogwarts slept. He climbed alone to the astronomy tower and looked up at the vast star-strewn sky. Magic thrummed through him, full to an unfamiliar peak, a swollen, expansive sensation. A long-dormant talent had finally stirred again, and this time his aim was audacious, almost arrogant, to raise the dead. Why not, he thought. He closed his eyes and sank inward, letting his mind plunge to the deepest layer of his consciousness. Vast currents of magic swelled under his will, trying to weave a single, ultimate spell that could reverse death and reshape the soul. Inside his spirit, countless intricate circuits spun into being, fused, collapsed, and reassembled. He sought the laws of dissipation, the track of a soul's return to nothingness, some fragile thread connecting life and death. It was like throwing a stone into a bottomless pool, only to stir a tiny, discouraging ripple. He failed. No matter how he structured the weave, the construction unraveled at the last moment. An invisible barrier, cold and absolute, refused any transgression of life's iron law. "As expected," Sagres murmured, opening his eyes. There was no real disappointment, only acknowledgement. Life and death were a foundation he could not shake, however potent his talent. The goal shifted. If he could not reverse death, he would pursue another kind of eternity, absolute control over form. He turned from the essence of life to the nature of being. Drawing on his knowledge of transfiguration and his own insight, he bent his magic not against a barrier, but into a precise, delicate weave. Gray-white threads for matter, emerald for life, azure for energy, pale gold for time, silvery white for space, 5 strands spun together, nested and linked. He began to construct a charm that would imprint transfiguration onto an object's fundamental existence, making the change permanent. Time blurred. Slowly, a new magic settled into him. Sagres breathed out, fatigue faint at the edges of his satisfaction. Permanent transfiguration, or perhaps cursed transfiguration, had been born. He stretched out his palm. A galleon floated up and hovered above it. "Transfigure," he said. A soft light wrapped the coin. When it faded, the golden galleon was gone. In its place stood a crystal rose, impossibly lifelike. The petals were clear as ice, catching and scattering the faint dawn light. The veins on the leaves were visible, and even the tiny fuzz on the stem had been rendered in exquisite detail. This was no metal, no illusion, a genuine, solid thing whose form had been altered forever, an eternal work of art. Sagres touched the cool, hard surface with a single finger and smiled, a small, satisfied curve. This spell could not bring back the dead, but it could grant another kind of eternity. This form of permanence would, in many situations, be more devastating than death. It needed no continual maintenance from the caster and could not be simply undone, not even by the caster's own death. The rose would remain a rose forever. Others might use ordinary transfiguration to change it temporarily, but when their magic faded or the caster died, the object would revert to the eternally fixed crystal rose. He had, in effect, breached what had seemed an iron law of Gamp's law of elemental transfiguration. Chapter 228, Walton McNair. A few days later, the Daily Prophet ran an even more explosive series of front-page headlines. Day 1, front page, stunning reversal, Peter Pettigrew captured, true traitor who betrayed the Potters brought to justice. Subhead, Ministry confirms, Sirius Black wrongfully imprisoned for 12 years, retrial procedures launched immediately. Former hero Peter exposed as minion of Lord Voldemort. Day 2, front page, Order of Merlin, first class revoked, Peter Pettigrew's honor a historic mistake. Subhead, Ministry and the Order of Merlin issue joint statement, Peter's fraudulent actions tainted the highest honor, medal recalled and expulsion permanent. Day 3, front page, Ministry apologizes, Minister Fudge promises full investigation into the Black case, judicial fairness must be restored. Subhead, Cornelius Fudge, I deeply apologize for the immense suffering inflicted on Mr. Black. We will fully compensate him and ensure nothing like this happens again. Each paper hit the wizarding world like a stone thrown into a still lake, setting off an unprecedented storm. Shock, fury, questions about the ministry, waves of sympathy for Sirius Black. Every corner of the community buzzed with emotion. The name Peter Pettigrew became shorthand for betrayal, cowardice, and disgrace. The setting sun poured a golden glow over the old tower, turning the cold stone into warm hues. Harry and Sirius stood together on the covered bridge, looking out over the forbidden forest, streaked crimson and gold, and the distant, dark lake. Black wore clean but ill-fitting clothes. His gray eyes were bright with new life, reflecting the dying light. It feels strange, he said. His voice was still a little hoarse, but it was relaxed in a way Harry had never heard in him, even edged with a small, bewildered smile. I can walk in public again. I don't have to hide. I don't have to dread the looks I used to get. Harry smiled back. Good, Strange. He hesitated, then added softly, Welcome back, Sirius. Black's body trembled. He turned to Harry, and sudden moisture gathered in his eyes. Thank you, Harry, he choked. Thank you for stopping me, for being right. Being alive, living free, is more important than hunting that rat. He sighed, long and slow, as if exhaling 12 years of staleness and pain. What will you do next? Harry asked. The ministry's paperwork will take time. Official acquittal, restoring property, all that mess. Black shrugged, a boyish casualness in his voice. That Fudge is bound to be keen to get me out of the way sooner rather than later, to soothe public opinion. Once things settle down. He looked at Harry, his gray eyes warm. I want to fix up that gloomy old house at 12 Grimmauld Place, make it livable. You might not know this, but I'm your godfather. Maybe I should prepare a room for you, if you'd like. Harry's chest warmed. He nodded without hesitation, his smile bright. I'd like that. Very much. Sirius smiled back, a real smile, one that seemed to lift weight from his shoulders. He looked once more at the sinking red sun and said in a low, powerful voice, Yes, living in the sunlight, it feels absolutely bloody amazing. When Peter Pettigrew was finally marched out of Hogwarts by Ministry Aurors, he was little more than a breathing corpse. His exhausted magic could hardly hold him upright. He was dragged along like a sack of rotten tatters. The clever, shifty eyes that once darted with fear and cunning now held only hollow resignation. Even the Dementor's cold produced only a faint twitch. Minister Fudge had thundered in court that Peter would be locked deep inside Azkaban to await the Dementor's kiss. The courtroom had erupted in fury. Curses had nearly drowned out proceedings. Peter, however, sat in a stupor. He felt no fear, no anger, only a vast, numbing emptiness. The long ordeal had drained not just his magic, but the last of his vitality. He was trash, waiting to be thrown away. The trial stretched on for days. Each day he was forced to take Veritaserum and answer the same questions over and over. A temporary detention cell at the ministry, cold and oppressive, became a strange respite. The bone-deep chill the Dementors would bring was terrifying, but here he didn't have to meet those hateful eyes, nor constantly worry that someone would leech away the last of his powers. He curled in the corner, breathing the thin, free air, praying for the trial to finish, praying for the Dementor's kiss to end his torment. That hollow kiss seemed a mercy compared to the living hell of dread. But fate decided his punishment was not yet complete. Late one night, when the Auror on duty was briefly distracted by a stage disturbance, a dark shadow slid into the cell like melted tar. The figure found Peter instantly. A large, calloused hand clamped over his mouth as he tried to scream. "Quiet, you filthy rat!" hissed a malevolent voice close to his ear, thick with disgust and threat. Under the dim light from the corridor, Peter could see the intruder's face. Lean, harsh, and hard. Walton McNair, Chief Executioner for the Committee for the Disposal of Dangerous Creatures under the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures. A man known for cold efficiency with dangerous beasts, and someone Peter remembered as a follower of Lord Voldemort, one of the Death Eaters. McNair produced a heavy axe and, with sparks flying, hacked at the shackles on Peter's ankle until the specially forged restraints were broken. His other hand seized the back of Peter's neck like an iron vice. "Come with me, Wormtail." The voice was rough and hoarse, smelling faintly of blood and slaughter. Peter was dragged across the stone like a ruined sack, pain stabbing through him as he let out soft whimpers. Walton McNair had a plan. He avoided the ministry's surveillance spells and patrols with the ease of someone who knew its labyrinthine corridors by heart, and he guided Peter Pettigrew through back passages until they reached a storage room that reeked of disinfectant and animal entrails. It was part of the Committee for the Disposal of Dangerous Creatures, back end, piled with discarded cages and processing tools, one of the ministry's most overlooked corners. McNair grabbed a length of animal entrails, hoisted Peter over his shoulder like livestock, and left the ministry through a fireplace. No sooner had they gone than he apparated straight to his secret hideout. With a sickening thud, Peter was thrown onto cold concrete, stars exploding behind his eyes. The stone room smelled of blood. Knives, hooks, and chains in grotesque shapes lined the walls. This was McNair's private workroom, a place that would make even the fiercest creatures shudder. McNair lit his wand, its pale glow washing over his grim face. He looked down at the trembling figure on the floor with the same appraisal one might give to an animal. "Pettigrew," he said, voice ice, "or should I call you valiant member of the Order of Merlin?" A mocking smirk twisted his lips. "The fools at the ministry were completely duped by you, but I haven't forgotten. Tell me, Wormtail, where is the master?" Peter shrank inward, fear snapping through him. "I don't know. The master, he was defeated. He tried to play dumb." His voice shook. "Liar." McNair kicked him in the stomach with brutal force. Peter curled into a ball, jerking and gasping. McNair leaned down, his breath foul and heavy, and picked up a red-hot branding iron shaped like a coiled snake. "Won't talk? I have many ways of dealing with disobedient creatures. I can peel your skin off little by little, make you feel pain worse than a Dementor." The branding iron glowed with terror. Peter's last shred of will collapsed. Sagres had drained his power, and McNair was poised to destroy his only remaining body. "Wah! Please let me go, I don't know," he wailed. McNair tossed the branding iron aside as if it were a trifling thing, drew his wand and hissed, "Crucio!" Red light struck Peter. The The pain made him spasm, choke, and wail. "Don't play with me, you parasite who clings to the strong." McNair snarled. "You hid for 12 years after the Master fell. You survived Black and Dumbledore. You know things. Speak. Where is the Master?" He pressed the cold wand tip to Peter's throat, and the red light flared again. The crucio and the wand against his body shattered whatever hope Peter had left. He was too weak even to struggle. He knew the ways of Death Eaters when they believed they had a traitor in hand. Broken, he spat out, Albania." Tears and snot ran down his face. "He's in the Black Forest, in Albania. He's weak, waiting for a chance and the help of loyal servants." A fanatic glint crossed McNair's eyes, then a deeper suspicion. "Albania? The Black Forest? Are you sure? If you lie, I swear it, on my life." Peter raised a trembling hand, trying to add weight to his words. "He needs help." McNair considered him for a long moment, then snorted and withdrew his wand. "Smart move, Wormtail." He walked to a cage in the corner, covered with a thick black cloth and radiating a cold animal aura. "Since you know where the Master is and what the Master needs." With one violent motion, he stripped the cloth away. Inside the cage coiled a massive viper, its scales catching the dim light with a sinister sheen. Nagini. Peter's stomach dropped. The snake fixed him with vertical, unblinking pupils. McNair threw the entrails toward the cage. The snake struck them midair, wrapping its thick body around the meat. "The Master's most loyal companion," McNair said with odd reverence. "I've kept her hidden, waiting for the right moment." He turned to Peter, a cruel smile on his face. "Now, Wormtail, your task has come. Take her to the Black Forest in Albania and find the Master. Nagini will make sure you don't try any tricks." Peter stared at the snake in horror. It could coil and crush him in an instant. "No, I can't. I have no magic left. You don't need your magic," McNair cut him off. "Nagini will guide you and watch you. If you try to run," he tapped the cage, "she'll make you feel things worse than death long before you get to the Master. You are her porter and her guide. Understand?" McNair shoved the heavy cage toward him. "Go. Leave Britain by the most discreet route you know. If you run off halfway or fail to find the Master." He leaned close to Peter's ear, voice full of malice. "Nagini will swallow you whole. Even your bones will be digested." Peter looked from the cage to McNair's implacable face. Terror almost made him lose control of his bladder. He did not want to go. The Black Forest in Albania was a notorious den of dark creatures. He certainly did not want to see a broken Master. But he knew the alternative. McNair and Nagini's cruelty would be 1,000 times worse. Faced with absolute power and the threat of annihilation, Peter's feeble will fractured. He was still afraid to die. McNair thrust a wide black robe at him. "Put it on," he ordered. Hands shaking, Peter grabbed the robe and fumbled it on. Nagini, having finished the entrails, lifted her head and slid elegantly, dangerously from the cage, leaving a winding trail across the stone. She glided to Peter, her forked tongue flicking inches from his pale, terrified face. Then, she slithered beneath the robe and wound herself around his spine. Her cool, heavy coils pressed down until he could barely straighten. He could feel the mass of her body coiling along him, the sound of scales whispering like a promise of death. "Go." McNair opened a hidden back door that led to a disused rubbish transport tunnel. Peter took one last look at McNair's cruel face, felt Nagini tighten around him, and had no choice. Dragging his feet, he stumbled out into the late-night darkness of London and began, with every step weighted by dread, the desperate journey to Albania. Chapter 230. Am I the only one getting targeted? Cornelius Fudge felt like he might explode. He sat in the high-backed chair that symbolized the minister's authority in the Ministry of Magic courtroom, struggling to maintain a dignified air as he prepared to preside over the historic trial of Peter Pettigrew. This, he told himself, would be his last chance to salvage his reputation and prove the ministry could correct its mistakes. The public gallery was packed with reporters and angry citizens. Flashbulbs popped like fireflies. Fudge cleared his throat, ready with an impassioned opening statement that would pin the entire blame on Pettigrew, this vile deceiver. An Auror burst in without knocking, face ashen, and hurried to Fudge's side. "Me minister, it's bad. Peter Pettigrew, he's been taken." "What?" Fudge's voice cut through the courtroom. He shot to his feet, his wide robes knocking over the ink bottle on the table. Black ink bled across the papers, matching the sudden collapse of his composure. "In the ministry? On the eve of the trial? Are you joking? What are you lot good for?" he bellowed, spittle nearly spraying the aura. The courtroom erupted. Reporters surged forward like sharks sensing blood, questions raining down. "Minister Fudge, what happened? Did Peter Pettigrew escape? Is there more to this case?" Fudge felt his vision narrow and ears buzz. It was over. Completely over. The uproar from Sirius Black's supposed death hadn't settled. The Order of Merlin's scandal still smoldered, and now the one prisoner he'd used as the public scapegoat had been taken from the ministry's supposedly secure detention. It was a humiliation of the highest order, a slap to the face of the ministry itself. Rage burned through him, but beneath it something colder and more practiced took over. Panic had to be managed. If this exploded further, his career would be finished. The public's trust in the ministry under Fudge would collapse, and he would be remembered as the most incompetent minister ever. He forced himself to breathe, felt the heat of fury give way to a numb, professional calm, the same numbness that had let him steer the narrative after Sirius's disappearance and when dealing with other scandals. The angry mask melted into a solemn expression. He raised his hand. Magical amplification lifted his voice above the hubbub. "Silence!" he declared. He cultivated an air of grave solemnity. "Ladies and gentlemen, please be silent. I have just received extremely distressing and regrettable news." He let the pause hang, sweeping the room with a look that seemed to gather strength and buy him a moment. Due to the heinous crimes committed by Peter Pettigrew, especially his betrayal of the Potters and the 12 years of injustice suffered by Mr. Sirius Black, his soul has been thoroughly corrupted by evil. It emits a kind of stench that even certain dark beings cannot resist. Fudge's phrasing carried official weight. Just now, while Peter was awaiting final judgment, two Dementors, strongly attracted by that wickedness, violated strict procedures, breached the ministry's protective wards, and entered the detention area. The courtroom held its breath. Fudge's voice took on a note of contrived sorrow. They performed the Dementor's kiss on Peter Pettigrew. A ripple of gasps and murmurs swept through the crowd. The Dementor's kiss? Inside the ministry? Horrifying. He was a traitor. Didn't he deserve it? But the trial wasn't finished. Fudge raised his voice to forestall questions. Although Peter's crimes were abhorrent and he deserved a public trial, the rampage of these uncontrollable creatures has caused an irreversible tragedy. This represents a serious failure in the ministry's security systems, and as minister, I must accept responsibility. He displayed contrition and promised swift action. Peter is dead. His soul has been entirely taken. Only an empty shell remains. We have lost the opportunity to publicly expose his crimes and bring solace to the victims' families. This is a failure of justice and a grave loss for the ministry. Reporters scribbled frantically. Tomorrow's headlines wrote themselves. Dementors run amok. Traitor Peter executed in custody. Minister Fudge deplores security lapses, vows reform. Fudge steered the narrative with skill, twisting the incident away from the scandal of a high-profile prisoner being abducted to a supposed security lapse caused by Dementors, conveniently reaffirming that Pettigrew deserved his fate. The anger that had burned in him now felt like an old, familiar wariness. He wanted the farce ended. "Given the prisoner's death, this trial is canceled," he said, his tone cool and formal. "Meeting adjourned." He waved one hand, as if shooing away flies, and left the courtroom surrounded by aurors without looking back. He needed to manage the aftermath, call the Obliviation Department to ensure any aurors who had seen the scene forgot it, arrange for Peter's body to be dealt with so it could never be used against the ministry, and fabricate a plausible account of what had happened. As for who had actually taken Peter and where he had gone, what conspiracies lay behind it all, Fudge's thoughts were blunt and selfish. He didn't care where Pettigrew was. He only wanted one thing: don't make waves that would sink him. Chapter 231. Christmas comes again in December. Hogwarts lay wrapped in a thick, silvery blanket of snow. In the early morning, the low sun poured through the tall windows, lighting the glittering ice outside and setting the whole castle aglow as if it were part of a fairy tale. The air smelled of pine and fresh gingerbread, and the crackle of fires in the hearth mingled with a warmth that felt uniquely Christmas. The great hall had been transformed for the season. A towering Christmas tree stood in the center, and once again Sagres had taken on the task of decorating it. Countless enchanted stars, soft and glowing, dotted the emerald branches and slowly rotated like a tiny Milky Way. Small transfigured animals, crystal-clear deer, awkward snow owls, and even tiny fish that seemed to swim among the boughs, sparkled among the needles. Sagres had given these ice sculptures a faint, gentle magic. They blinked, moved their heads, and shivered as if alive. The whole tree was a miniature winter forest, brimming with childish wonder and holiday joy. Students gathered beneath it, delighted. The younger ones pressed forward, searching the branches for the moving creatures and for magical gift boxes. Hagrid had made a huge contribution as well. He'd brought several of the straightest firs from near the castle, trimmed them until they looked just right, and had brought some of the creatures from his class to add to the festivities. Of course, they were all small, well-screened creatures, docile by nature. Fluffy puffskeins purred in padded baskets, making it impossible not to stroke them. Bowtruckles peeked curiously from the tree, watching the crowd with bright, cautious eyes. A few unicorn foals paced quietly on a bed of hay near the entrance. Their golden manes shimmered in the candlelight, solemn and beautiful. Hagrid bustled about the hall, smiling and fussing over his little darlings, and every so often he boomed, "Easy now, don't frighten them." Harry, Ron, and Hermione had all chosen to stay at Hogwarts for the holidays. Harry was grateful. He knew Ron and Hermione had stayed only to keep him company. Early on Christmas morning, the three of them, wearing new Christmas sweaters, squeezed together at the Gryffindor table and dug into the feast. Giant roasted turkeys, piles of roast, gleaming Yorkshire puddings, every sort of pie and pudding. The smells were irresistible. They ate and compared gifts. Harry had been given a firebolt and a short, messy note from Sirius. His classmates crowded around to ogle the broom, but Harry kept a tight hold on the note. The message was brief. "I've been too busy lately, Harry, but don't worry, we'll spend Christmas together next year." And the handwriting was a scrawl, but the words warmed Harry in a way the firebolt could not. Ron and Hermione had presents from Sirius as well. Ron got a tiny, frantic owl to replace Scabbers. It zipped and squealed and refused to sit still. Ron pretended to grumble about its noise, but named it Pigwidgeon at once. Hermione received a magical tome from the House of Black's library, full of rare and potentially dangerous spells, along with their counter-curses. "This spell is too dangerous," she said at one point, frowning, but she kept reading, fascinated. "Professor Greengrass said there was no harm in understanding it properly," she added. The mood at the staff table was easy and cheerful, too. Dumbledore, in deep purple robes embroidered with silver stars, sat talking amiably with McGonagall, whose stern features were softened by the season as she sipped eggnog. Flitwick perched on a cushion and excitedly described a new spell to Professor Sprout, who listened with warm interest and laughed good-naturedly. Sagres sat to one side, speaking in low tones with Lupin. His plate was almost untouched. He toyed with a crystal goblet of mead while his calm gaze scanned the hall and lingered on the little ice creatures he had created. Snape, farther down the table, kept his usual black robes and sat with a glass of water, watching the ripples as if they held secrets. Hagrid squeezed onto the staff bench to gobble a huge turkey leg and to tell Snape, at great length and with obvious pride, how he had managed to keep the unicorn foal's parents calm at the edge of the forbidden forest. Snape listened on, lips drawn, clearly trying not to listen. Halfway through the feast, as carols rose and the hall buzzed with laughter, a disheveled shape stumbled through the doors. Professor Sybil Trelawney. She smelled faintly of sherry, was wrapped in layers of scarves and beads, and her glasses had slid to the end of her nose. Her eyes were unfocused as she swayed in. "See, celebrate," she slurred, her voice suddenly loud enough to stop the room. She lurched toward the staff table, staring blankly at those around her. Dumbledore's voice, gentle as ever, greeted her. "Sybil, Merry Christmas. You're late." She halted as if she heard him, then her eyes unfocused again. Her voice dropped into the tremulous cadence of a prophecy. "Cold scales slither on decaying leaves. Loyal servants bear heavy shackles. Fearful sweat drenches humble bodies. He seeks. Oh no, he is driven toward the lurking shadow. The betrayer is walking toward his destined cage. Her words dwindled to a whisper. Then, as if exhausted by the utterance, she went limp and collapsed into the nearest empty chair, her head lolling to the side. She was asleep before anyone could react, even letting out a tiny snore. A hush fell over the great hall. Students glanced at one another, some bemused, some certain this was only Trelawney's drunken rambling. But around the staff table, several faces hardened. Dumbledore's serene smile dimmed. Something solemn touched his eyes. He looked meaningfully at Sagres. Sagres stopped spinning the rim of his glass. His gray eyes narrowed. He felt it. This was no ordinary outburst. Whatever mumbled words Trelawney had uttered, they bore the weight of a real prophecy, not her usual theatrics. Yet it was maddeningly vague. A betrayer? Pettigrew sprang to mind, but he should have been out of the picture. Hadn't the Daily Prophet said he'd received the Dementor's kiss? Unless Fudge had lied. Or maybe the prophecy pointed to someone else entirely. Sagres made a note to investigate when he could. Professor McGonagall, however, could not be bothered to fret in front of the students. She gave an exasperated sigh, waved for a house elf to fetch a blanket, and had Trelawney tucked in. At that cue, carols swelled, the house elves brought out more desserts and steaming drinks, and the great hall's merriment resumed. Trelawney's mutterings were soon swallowed by the festive noise. Most people moved on with their celebrations, oblivious, except for a few whose expressions lingered on that brief, unsettling utterance. The corridors of St. Mungo's Hospital for Magical Maladies and Injuries were trimmed with holly and berries, and healers in emerald robes bustled about with rare holiday smiles. Lucius Malfoy's brow was slightly furrowed, his expensive snake-headed cane tapping a measured rhythm on the polished floor. Beside him, Narcissa Malfoy preserved her usual poise, though a flicker of puzzlement showed in her blue eyes beneath the fall of her blonde hair. Their son had dragged them here. Draco. Draco, I must reiterate, Lucius said in a low voice, visiting a former Defense Against the Dark Arts professor on sick leave? This is hardly a necessary social engagement for our family, especially at this time of year. He meant Christmas, when pure-blood families were supposed to be cementing alliances, not making unnecessary visits. Draco walked a step ahead, his platinum hair immaculate. Father, you don't understand. His voice was low but steady. Professor Lumina, what she taught last term wasn't just theory. They were practical skills you can use in critical moments. It helped me a great deal. I think it's only right to thank her personally. Lucius snorted softly, clearly disdainful of such sentimental gratitude. Wasn't a professor's duty simply to teach? Must the heir of House Malfoy pay an in-person call? Draco, sensing his father's indifference, turned and supplied the crucial detail. Besides father, Professor Lumina is a friend of Professor Greengrass, a very good friend. At the name Greengrass, Lucius's voice tightened. He and Narcissa exchanged a quick look, both stiffened, their features closing into guarded interest. Is that so? Lucius said. Draco nodded, relieved and a little pleased to see them change tack. Lucius took a breath as if deciding, and the reluctance fell away as neatly as a mask. Concern replaced hauteur on his face. Narcissa, he said, unusually solemn, we arrived unprepared. We cannot arrive empty-handed to see a friend of Mr. Greengrass. I recall a fine little magical floristry in the lobby. Less than 15 minutes later, Lucius was holding a valuable bouquet of moongrass and hollyberries that shimmered faintly with a protective charm. Narcissa carried an exquisitely wrapped box of sweets, a Wong gift pack. Draco watched their sudden efficiency and exaggerated enthusiasm with a small, wry twitch at his mouth, then led them to the curse injuries ward where Professor Lumina lay. He knocked politely. "Come in," came a voice that still held its characteristic spark, though weaker. Draco opened the door and stepped in, followed by Lucius and Narcissa. "Professor Lumina," he said, keeping his tone proper. "Merry Christmas. My parents and I came to see you." Professor Lumina, Kestrel, blinked in surprise. Her gaze swept over Lucius and Narcissa before settling on Draco. A bright, slightly breathless smile bloomed. "Oh, Draco Malfoy, I remember you, the Slytherin Seeker. Very good at Quidditch, though you did lose to Gryffindor last year." She stated his failings without malice, more as a plain observation. Draco's cheeks flushed. He coughed and gave a slightly embarrassed smile. Yes, Professor. Are you feeling better? Much better, she said, waving a bandaged arm with a touch of theatricality. Then her eyes landed on the Malfoys and the bouquet. Oh, you two, this is very kind of you. You came to see me as well? Lucius put on an impeccable expression of concern. Professor Lumina, Merry Christmas. Draco was very concerned when he heard of your illness and insisted on visiting. As parents, we wish to show the House of Malfoy's respect for an outstanding educator. We hope this small gift will lift your spirits and aid your recovery. His words were carefully arranged to attribute the visit to Draco's filial concern and the family's esteem for a distinguished teacher. Narcissa nodded gracefully and set the box of sweets on the bedside table. A small token, Professor. Wishing you a pleasant holiday. Lumina's pale face flushed with pleasure. Thank you so much. You're very thoughtful. Please, sit. Oh, forgive me. I can't stand. Have you had anything to eat? St. Mungo's food is adequate. Sister Rolson keeps insisting on these green nutrition purees, good for curse residues apparently, but the taste, tsk. She launched into a rapid, cheerful complaint about hospital cuisine. Narcissa listened with courteous patience, her eyes wandering over the sparse furnishings of the ward. Lucius, however, seemed uneasy. He had not come to be entertained by talk of hospital porridge. When Lumina paused for breath, he steered the conversation. Draco has praised your lessons highly, Lucius said smoothly. He said your teaching is very practical, particularly for special circumstances. Does Professor Greengrass visit you often? I understand you two knew each other before you began teaching? That's right, Lumina replied candidly. We've known each other for years. She hesitated, then her expression flickered with a guilty little recollection. Before she could elaborate, a soft tapping sounded against the ward window. A raven pecked at the glass, clutching a small, ornate gift box in its beak. Ah, it's Loyalties! Lumina exclaimed, struggling to sit up. Narcissa opened the window. The raven, Loyalties, glided in with practiced ease, deposited the tiny box on Lumina's quilt, and then settled on the bedside table. The bird cocked its head and regarded the Malfoys with bright, clever eyes. Lumina eagerly unwrapped the package. Inside lay a delicate crystal vial, carved with protective runes. Within it, a warm golden liquid swirled like bottled sunlight. A card tucked underneath bore a sharp, elegant hand. Sagres. The note read, in Sagres' unmistakable script, "Can you attend the party on Saturday evening? I need your help confirming and interpreting a prophecy." Lumina's face lit up. Oh, she breathed, eyes shining. It's Felix Felicis. She held the vial tenderly, delight clear and unabashed on her face, so delighted she nearly forgot the others in the room. I haven't been out in so long, she murmured then, as if remembering the Malfoys, she slipped the golden potion into the pocket of her hospital gown like a precious keepsake and smoothed her expression back into hospitable composure. Oh, where were we? Oh, we are actually all. Lumina's floodgates were about to open. The words bronze feather trembled on her tongue. Then she froze, mouth parting as the rest of the sentence stuck. The air in the ward seemed to hush. Lucius caught the falter in an instant, suspicion flaring behind his composed mask, though his face still kept the appropriate concern. Narcissa's delicate brow twitched. Draco looked at the professor with puzzled concern. That! Lumina's mind raced faster than it ever had. Her eyes swept over the three members of House Malfoy, and as if struck by a bolt of inspiration, she brightened. Ah! She clapped once, deliberately restrained, an obvious reminder of the injury she was nursing. Her expression shifted into a mysterious, enthusiastic smile. Look at my memory. I was so busy talking, I almost forgot the main point. As thanks for coming to visit me and for the delightful gifts, I'll do a divination. Consider it my Christmas return present. Guaranteed exclusive recipe, no deception. The abrupt change stunned Lucius into a brief silence. Divination? He inwardly scoffed, but outwardly forced a courteous smile. Miss Lumina, you are too kind. Visiting a patient is only proper. There's no need. No. It's a must. Lumina cut him off, unusually authoritative and certain. She ignored Lucius's refusal and carefully drew something from the depths of the bedside drawer. It wasn't a dusty crystal ball or a deck of stained tarot cards. It was a perfectly polished sphere of deep purple translucent crystal, the right size for her to cup in both hands. Inside the globe, innumerable points of stardust rotated slowly, and thin blue ribbons of light threaded among them. The orb thrummed with an ancient, potent magic that felt nothing like ordinary divination tools. Looking at it made the breath catch and the ears strain for faint whispers. Lucius, Narcissa, and Draco found their gazes pulled to the object. Lucius set aside his contempt and grew serious. This was no ordinary trinket. It was beyond anything in the Malfoy family collection. Lumina took a steadying breath. Her playful smile fell away, replaced by rare solemnity. She set the crystal on her covered knees, hovered her hands above it, closed her eyes. Long lashes cast shadows over her pale face. Only the soft rhythm of her breathing filled the room. Seconds later, her eyes snapped open. The lively spark that usually animated them was gone. They seemed bottomless, pupils reflecting the moving light inside the orb. Her focus drifted beyond the three of them, as if she were looking into some distant, unknowable future. Her voice changed too, no longer her bright, lively tone, but deep and remote, as though an older voice spoke through her. The threads of fate entwine and tangle. Past choices hang like anchors, dragging the ship. Her gaze bored into Lucius's carefully controlled composure, finding the hidden corners he kept even from himself. I see. Gilded lies, a scepter wound with a venomous serpent, a misguided course cloaked in opulence and an ancient name. It once brought brief glory, but hid a bottomless rift. In that rift, there are cold flames and hissing whispers. Lucius's body went taut. He gripped his snake-headed cane until his knuckles blanched. Color drained from his face. Each phrase pierced the softest, most reluctant memories. His allegiance to Lord Voldemort, the choices born of calculation and fear. Narcissa made a small, involuntary sound and gripped his arm. Lumina turned to Narcissa with the barest trace of pity. A mother's radiance is a resilient shield, but also a weighty shackle. The desire to protect can blind you to the path ahead. Narcissa's face paled, her lips trembled. She could understand, painfully, the compromises a mother makes to keep a child safe. Finally, Lumina's gaze rested on Draco. Her voice softened, but carried a hard forewarning. A young soul, struggling under silver and green shadows, a storm brews on the horizon. Will he drift along the route of his elders, or cut the anchor chain and find his own harbor? Draco's chest tightened with sudden fear. Confusion and panic clouded his eyes. Lumina's voice climbed into a warning. Past mistakes curl like shadows, if you follow the old way. Her hands trembled on the crystal. Inside, the stardust spun faster, blue arcs of light crackled, and the globe emitted a low, resonant hum. The abyss yawns ahead. Tears of regret will whip up a storm. No house, however glorious, can withstand it. Choose again, before the storm falls. As she reached the last words, the orb's light guttered out. The spinning dust and the blue threads faded. Lumina sagged against the pillow as if all strength had drained from her, breathing hard. The depth had gone from her eyes. They returned to their familiar color, but were edged with exhaustion and bewilderment. She glanced at the dim crystal on her knees, then at the three stunned faces of House Malfoy, and scratched her head awkwardly. Divination's over. You can interpret that yourselves. Merry Christmas." Her voice slipped back into its usual unreliable, slightly muddled cadence, as if the person who delivered the thunderous warning had been someone else entirely. At that moment, the ward door opened. A young healer in a robe with a calm, kindly face stepped in, name badge reading Mirabella Rolson. She pushed a small cart loaded with bottles and instruments, paused when she saw the Malfoys, then gave a professional smile. "Arisa, it's time for today's checkup." Her voice was clear and steady. She moved to Lumina's bedside, subtly putting herself between Lumina and Lucius's searching eyes, and adjusted the pillow. Lumina exaggeratedly sighed with relief. "Oh, Sister Rolson, you've come at the right time. I was feeling a bit tired." She tucked the crystal back into the bedside drawer, cooperatively offered her wrist for examination, and gave the Malfoys an apologetic smile. "I'm so sorry. It's treatment time. Thank you for coming to see me." Mirabella turned to them with polite but firm courtesy. "The patient needs treatment now. Thank you for your visit." The dismissal was gentle but unmistakable. Lucius still wore the chill of Lumina's prophecy like a physical thing. His voice had a brittleness he didn't notice. "Of course, the treatment is important, Dean Rolson." He forced a nod. "Professor Lumina, please rest and recover. I wish you a speedy recovery." There was strain in the last words. He gathered Narcissa and Draco and hurried from the ward, all three of them dazed. The bright corridor lights did nothing to lift the gloom that weighed on Lucius's chest. Lumina's low warning echoed in his mind like a spell. Choose again before the storm descends. For the first time, the snake-headed cane felt unbearably heavy in his hand. On the windowsill, Loquetus cocked its head, its cold, ruby eyes following their retreating forms, and let out a short, significant chirp. Chapter 234, The Ministry of Magic. The Ministry of Magic's great marble hall felt oddly empty and hollow during the Christmas holidays. A few duty-bound wizards hurried through, all of them wearing the thin, sour look of people forced to work overtime. Sagres Greengrass moved through the hall like a ghost, his well-cut dark gray robes a sharp contrast to the ministry's standard black. He walked with the calm surety of a man with a single purpose, the minister's office. He had no appointment and made no announcement. When Cornelius Fudge's young assistant stepped forward to block him with officious phrasing, Sagres only glanced at him. The assistant's protest died in his throat. He staggered back a step as if an invisible pressure had pushed him, clearing the way to the heavy, ornate oak door. It opened automatically at Sagres's approach, the protective enchantments recognizing his presence. He walked in as if entering his own sitting room. Cornelius Fudge was buried beneath a mountain of holiday cards and urgent papers, trying to drown his nerves, raw after Peter Pettigrew's disappearance in busyness. He mistook the opening door for his assistant bringing tea and, without lifting his head, snapped, "Didn't I say not to be?" Seeing who had entered, cut the rest of the sentence off. Fudge's corpulent body shot up from the wide ministerial chair, his face drained of color, leaving only a terrified pallor. His steady grip closed on the back of the chair. The arm Sagres had once severed and replaced with a magical prosthesis seemed to throb faintly in the sudden tension. Greengrass, mister," he stammered. His voice trembled as he tried to force a brittle smile that looked more like a sob. What brings you here? This is a pleasant surprise. Please, have a seat. Would you like fire whiskey? Tea?" "Peter Pettigrew," Sagres said flatly. He did not sit. He stood in the middle of the office, still and calm. "Where is he?" Fudge felt as if an invisible hand had gripped his heart. The question he had dreaded most hit him like a physical blow. Cold sweat soaked his collar. Peter?" he managed. Fudge shoved down his panic and plastered an expression of ornate grief on his face. "Ah, Mr. Greengrass, this news breaks my heart. That despicable traitor, that wretched. Where is he?" Sagres repeated, the room seeming to cool with the single syllable. Fudge's Adam's apple bobbed. He's but a shell of his former self. Just before the trial, Dementors, two very hungry Dementors, went out of control. They were drawn to Peter's wickedness and breached our defenses. They performed the Dementor's kiss on him. It was a dreadful security lapse at the ministry. I've ordered a full inquiry. Anyone responsible will be dealt with. As regrettable as it is, he never made it to a full trial. He produced a prepared document titled Report on the Accidental Death of Peter Pettigrew and Subsequent Handling, and thrust it toward Sagres, hoping paper could substitute for truth. Sagres did not glance at it. His gray eyes regarded Fudge and, without preamble, reached into the minister's mind. Legilimency slid into Fudge's unguarded thoughts, tearing through the flimsy barricades of panic and calculation. Fudge felt a raw, flaying pain in his skull as his private thoughts spilled out like a broken dam. The courtroom on the day of the abduction, the sudden panic when Aurors burst in reporting Peter missing, Fudge pacing his office like a trapped animal, rubbing his temples, exhausted and already scheming, must cover this up, must be fixed. The roaring command to the Daily Prophet's editor, "Run it as Dementors out of control. Peter is dead. Emphasize the ministry's corrective action, understand?" Beneath it all, a brittle fear of Sagres and a rancid resentment. It's him again. Whenever he shows up, trouble follows. Every lie, every concealment, every cowardly calculation bared itself. Sagres stepped back as calmly as he had stepped in, eyes sliding away as if the invasion had never happened. Fudge, by contrast, felt hollowed out, legs failing. He lurched and braced his palms on the desk to stay upright, gasping, forehead slick with cold sweat. The shame of being so thoroughly exposed throbbed behind his eyes. "Useless," Sagres said at last, voice cold and contemptuous. He looked at Fudge with nothing but disgust. A man whose magic is nearly spent, practically a squib, and he can be taken from the heart of the ministry in broad daylight? Cornelius Fudge, Minister for Magic, your solution is to spin lies and cover your incompetence and dereliction. His contempt swept the office like a draught. This place, this so-called seat of authority, a nest of idle incompetence. Fudge's face went ashen. Fear and humiliated fury twisted through him, but he had no words to counter the calm, remorseless scrutiny. He felt naked and exposed as the office door was flung open. High heels clicked on the marble. Dolores Umbridge bustled in, pink cardigan and bow bright against the marble, flanked by a small band of nervous aurors, wands at the ready. Her round, toad-like face was flushed with excitement and an oddly brazen courage. Her stubby thumb rubbed at her long index finger. On closer look, the finger wore an ornate prosthetic cot, a little memento Sagres had given her the previous year. Bolstered by her escort, she seemed to think she could take him on. "Greengrass," she trilled. Her voice was thin and shrill, loaded with cultivated hatred. "Who gave you permission to intrude on the minister's office? This is the Ministry of Magic, not Hogwarts. Minister Fudge's good nature does not give you the right to flout the law." She straightened, trying to make her pink ensemble look imposing. "Leave at once, or I will place you under arrest for obstruction of official duties and threatening a senior ministry official." The aurors behind her swallowed visibly, palms damp on their wands. They knew better than Umbridge how dangerous this man was, but duty pushed them forward. Reluctantly, and with trembling resolve, they took a step toward him. 235. Don't bark. When Fudge saw Umbridge burst into his office, flanked by her people, he clutched at the chance for rescue. A flicker of hope crossed his face and his posture straightened, though his whole body still trembled. Sagres Greengrass, however, did not change his expression. He ignored the newcomers entirely, his gaze and attention fixed on Fudge as if the intruders were nothing more than gnats. Umbridge bristled at being disregarded and pushed forward, voice high and sharp. "Did you hear me? Greengrass, I order you." Only then did Sagres turn his head. His deep gray eyes settled on Umbridge for a single measured look. Her words died in her throat as though a hand had clamped her windpipe. The color drained from her face, and a cold, instinctive fear flooded her. Sagres spoke slowly. His voice was calm, yet in the dead silence of the office, every syllable rang with a dangerous clarity. "Dolores Umbridge," he paused, the look in his eyes like an ice pick. "If you say one more word," he continued, "I will kill you." There was no tremor in his tone, but the room seemed to stop breathing. Only Fudge's panicked, heavy gasps and the quiet swallowing of the aurors broke the silence. Umbridge froze, her face gone white, the pink bow at her throat trembling absurdly with the rapid, ragged breaths now pulling at her chest. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Sagres turned away from her and fixed his cold calm back on the ashen minister. "Watch your dog, Fudge. If there is a next time, I won't mind cleaning up some trash for the ministry." Then, as if he had only been passing through, he left the minister's office as composedly as he had entered. Only when his footsteps had faded down the corridor did the frozen air in the office start to move again. Umbridge's knees gave way. A quick-thinking auror caught her before she hit the floor. Fudge sank back into his chair, hands over his face, his bulk shaking. Sagres did not leave the ministry immediately. Pettigrew's abduction was itself a gross dereliction of duty, and Fudge's clumsy cover-up made the situation worse. But Sagres's concern was not punishment for Fudge. It was a more pressing mystery. How had a nearly magicless prisoner, under strict guard in the heart of the ministry, been removed? Who had taken him? Using the fragments of thought he had gleaned from Fudge, he made his way to the temporary detention wing beneath the ministry. The place was quieter than usual, the tension spent, and an exhausted laxity in the air. Two aurors stood by the small cell where Peter had been held, their posture tight, eyes darting, clearly theater, extra guards Fudge had assigned to paper over his Dementor pretext. Sagres did not alarm them. A well-placed confundus charm blurred their perceptions, and he slipped into the cell. The cell itself was Spartan, cold stone, cramped space, a rusty iron bunk. The air smelled of sweat, and faintly, blood. Sagres's gaze swept the floor, walls, and doorframe inch by inch. Near the iron bunk he found what he had come to look for, a fresh, 10-inch slash in the stone floor. Someone had attempted a reparo. The surface looked roughly even, but the underlying stone was distorted, the mend hurried and clumsy. From that imperfect repair, a faint metallic tang of blood seeped. Sagres knelt, fingers hovering over the mark. Not a cutting spell. He dismissed the obvious magical explanation. Cutting charms leave distinct magical dispersion. This wound, though sharp-edged, bore the texture of physical tearing and impact. Cold weapon. He pictured the escape in his head. Swift movements, a single focused target, a forceful, clean arc. The depth, the angle, the trajectory, all spoke of a practiced hand accustomed to physical blades. A wizard, brazen enough to enter the ministry's inner detention, would normally choose magic. Someone who deliberately used a bladed weapon in that place in that way must have known the building and how to avoid magical detection. An inside job. Who inside the ministry would routinely use cold steel? The Dangerous Creatures Disposal Committee, under the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures. Their business was the disposal of dangerous creatures, a euphemism, often, for execution. And their executioners used heavy axes forged by goblins and ritualistically cursed to resist magic and cause fatal wounds. The conclusion was like a lamp switched on in the dark. The disposal committee's quarters were tucked away in a poorly lit corner of the ministry, the air there always a little tainted with preservatives and animal odors. The Christmas lull had left it mostly empty. Only one storage room at the far end hummed with dim yellow light, leaking from beneath its door. Sagres pushed the half-open door and slipped inside. The room was cluttered, grotesque skulls and jars of specimens mounted on the walls, sharp tools hanging in orderly rows. A tall man with a gaunt, impassive face stood with his back to the doorway, methodically wiping a large double-headed axe with an oilcloth stained dark with old blood. Even in the murk, the axe flashed a cold gleam, its blades carrying an ominous reddened sheen. The handle was dark hardwood, wrapped in leather for grip. At the sound of the door, the man spun. Recognition temporarily unpainted his features. "Greengrass?" he said in a dry, hoarse voice. Sagres stepped fully into the light. "Walden McNair," he said calmly. The oilcloth fell from McNair's hands as he tensed, one hand moving unconsciously toward the wand at his belt. "You used to be with the Auror office," Sagres continued, his tone neutral. "As far as I know, you've left the ministry. What are you doing in my trash disposal office?" McNair tried to steady his face, to cover the turmoil beneath. He met Sagres' eyes, measuring, cautious. Chapter 236. McNair goes offline. McNair's words died on his lips. Sagres' legitimacy closed over him like an instant lock. A thin thread of magic, like the tentacles of an octopus, slipped quietly into the unguarded depths of his mind. Disorientation hit him like a physical blow, and a flood of images surged out uncontrollably, as vivid as if they were playing before his eyes. How he'd slipped into the detention area, how he'd used that heavy execution axe to break the chains, how he'd dragged the limp Peter into a storage room reeking of blood and preservatives, how he'd used force and fear to pry Peter's mouth open. Albania, Black Forest. Every sordid, bloody detail was exposed without mercy. Sagres withdrew his gaze as if he had only been skimming an obscene, boring magazine. To McNair, it felt like being doused from head to toe in molten lava. The pain lingered in his skull. The humiliation of his thoughts being ripped open ignited his brutality and fear. Like a cornered, wounded beast, he stumbled backward and crashed into a tool rack with a clang. His face went rigid and contorted, a horrific purplish red, veins bulged and writhed across his forehead. "No!" he howled, animal and high. "You mind-probing bastard, demon!" Spittle flew as he screamed, voice raw with rage. "Who gave you the right? How dare you?" He trembled as he jabbed a stained fingertip at Sagres, as if to stab him through the air. Sagres only watched, his calm indifference maddening in a way no insult could match. "How dare you?" he said finally, voice low but slicing through McNair's roar. "Because you were once a Death Eater." His gaze drifted to the gleaming execution axe, then back to McNair. "What? During the ministry's purge of the Death Eater remnants, you slipped through the cracks, hid for over a decade, and now, smelling rot again, you think the coast is clear and you can crawl back to lick your old master's robes?" "Shut up," McNair snapped, stung at the heart. "You don't know the master's power. An ant like you can never begin to understand. His trust in me." Trust? Sargeras's tone was pure contempt. Save it. You're a spent, mangy dog, used up and ready to be thrown away. McNair let out a bestial, keening howl. His hands closed on the heavy execution axe on its stand, and for an instant, astonishing strength surged through him. Instead of charging like a man, he hurled the axe, half a man's height, toward Sargeras like a shot put. The blade screamed through the air. At the same time, he ripped his wand from his waist. Instinct and rage made the tip flare a deadly green. Avada Kedavra! The axe's thunder and the green light of the killing curse shattered the ministry's hush like an explosion. The great axe smashed into the stone behind where Sargeras had been standing. The hard ministry stone split like crumbling plaster, sending shards and dust everywhere and leaving a huge hole. The green beam, faster still, locked onto where Sargeras's heart had been. McNair's face, lit by smoke and green light, looked demonic. Killing intent boiled in the confined office. "What was that?" Cries ran down the corridor. "Over at the Committee on the Disposal of Dangerous Creatures. Someone used a killing curse. Alert! Move!" Footsteps and shouted orders converged on their door. But a moment before the green light would have struck Sargeras, he simply shifted his body. With one casual movement, the killing curse brushed the hem of his dark gray robes and shot into the swirling smoke behind him. McNair had seemed to anticipate that a single strike might fail. The instant he tossed the axe and fired the curse, he lunged forward like a raging bull. He raised his wand high, its tip flared with another spell. "Densaujo!" Sargeras flicked his wand, deflecting the spell with surgical precision, then pointed at the charging man. Expulso! A terrifying shockwave burst outward. An indescribable force slammed into McNair's chest. He didn't even have time to cry out before he was hurled backward with bone-rattling speed, as if struck by a battering ram. Blood and fragments of torn flesh spewed from his mouth. He plowed through the wall behind him. A section already hung with instruments of torture, and the tool rack shattered. Hooks, saws, scalpels clattered to the floor. McNair hit the rubble in a heap of mangled flesh, his sternum visibly caved in. Blood spread across the floor and the jagged fragments around him. His eyes rolled back. Only faint gasps came from his throat. By the time the first aurors and ministry officials burst into the office, wands raised, the fight was over. The room was thick with smoke, and the wall behind Sargeras gaped where the axe had cleaved it. Not far away, the chief executioner of the Committee on the Disposal of Dangerous Creatures lay in the ruined plaster and blood, a crushed, twitching body on the verge of death. The doorway filled with men and women frozen in the moment, broken only by McNair's shallow, ragged breathing. The aurors' hands shook on their wands. Cold sweat glistened down their backs. Sargeras paid them no heed. His cold gaze went to the dying man in the pool of blood. Then, a casual flick of his wand. With a whistling rush, the heavy execution axe flew back through the opening, becoming a cold blade of death. It descended with lethal precision toward McNair's neck. There was a sick, wet sound. A head rolled free, face frozen in horror and despair, tumbling over debris and blood before coming to rest near an auror's shoe. Empty eyes stared up. The headless body convulsed twice and stilled. The axe blade stuck deep in the floor. The handle trembled faintly. Sargeras turned slowly, his gaze sweeping the shocked figures at the doorway. Where his eyes fell, heads bowed in silence. "The man who broke the prisoner out has been captured for you," he said, his voice cold and authoritative. "Clean it up." He gave no further notice to the awed, shaken crowd. Calmly, he stepped through the opening the axe had made and vanished into the shadowed corridor. Behind him remained only the bloody mess, a headless corpse, the blood-stained axe embedded in the floor, and a group of trembling ministry officials and aurors who would not soon forget the scene. In the suffocating silence of the disposal committee office, a sharp, pinched voice, like a broken gong, shattered the stillness. What is there to be afraid of?" Umbridge snapped. She lowered the hand that had been pressed over her mouth. Her toad-like eyes bulged as she stared toward the place where Sargeras had vanished. "Look at yourselves. A bunch of useless good-for-nothings," she shrieked, the sound cracking between nerves and fury as she tried to mask fear with bluster and to rally the others. "No matter how powerful he is, he's only one man. One man. How many aurors do we have here? How many people? Let's all attack together. Drown him in spells. Can he survive a simultaneous barrage from dozens, even hundreds of wands? Take him down. Avenge Mr. McNair. Uphold the dignity of the Ministry of Magic. She jabbed a trembling finger toward the doorway, as if Sargeras were still standing there, waiting to be slaughtered. He trespassed into the ministry, attacked officials, murdered Mr. McNair in cold blood. The evidence is conclusive. This is open defiance of the law, rebellion. Her voice climbed higher, veneered with righteous outrage as she tried to summon courage in everyone else. Catch him, Minister Fudge. Catch this murderer. He left only moments ago. He can't have gone far. Fudge stared at McNair's bloodied corpse, at the great axe lying nearby, and memory of the terrifying power Sargeras had displayed crawled up his spine like ice. Give an order? With what? Send the wavering aurors who could barely hold their wands to certain death? His mouth opened and closed. No words came. The others at the door did not rally. Instead, they shrank back, eyes wide with panic. They looked at Umbridge as if she were a madwoman. Attack together? McNair's fate was a bloody lesson. Fear clamped down on them, paralyzing any impulse to act. Useless, all useless, Umbridge muttered, more to herself than anyone else. When no one answered and no one met her gaze, Umbridge shook with fury. What's the point of the ministry keeping you all? Not one of you. Shut up, Fudge roared. Veins stood out on his fat face. His alchemical prosthetic hand shot out like a steel clamp and seized the collar of Umbridge's pink cardigan, lifting her a little off the floor. You brainless idiot, he spat at her as he spoke. Put away the official jargon. Now. Immediately. Shut that stinking mouth of yours. His sudden ferocity was a splash of cold water. Umbridge froze, forced into silence by the hard, relentless pressure of his hand. Fudge released her and swept the room with a look that took in the terrified subordinates at the door. His voice had gone hoarse. What are you still standing around for? Clear the scene. Seal off the information. Everything that happened here today. His gaze flicked to McNair's decapitated body and the blood-stained great axe, and then settled on Umbridge with a chill that left the final threat hanging unspoken. Everyone in the room understood what would happen to anyone who leaked a single word. Meanwhile, deep in the black forest of Albania, winter light filtered through the dense, ancient canopy in pale, grudging slivers. The air was damp and heavy with decay, the smell of centuries of fallen leaves, rotting wood, and uncounted bones fermenting together. The exposed, gnarled roots of towering trees twisted over the forest floor like sleeping serpents, forming a natural labyrinth. Silence reigned. The occasional call of a strange bird or the rustle of an unseen creature only deepened the oppressive stillness. Sargeras appeared without warning in a mossed clearing. His dark gray robes blended with the trunks, and only his deep-set eyes glinted like cold stars. Wolf Soul Summon. A pack of luminous, ghostly wolves erupted into being and scattered at his command. He flickered away and, in the next breath, was standing on the highest branch of an ancient oak, looking down over the endless, shadowed woods. A cold wind ruffled his robes, but he remained motionless. Humanoid manifestation. An invisible lattice of magic spread from him like a spiderweb, mapping the forest in his mind. Topography, the aura of creatures, the faint currents of ley lines, forming a three-dimensional impression. No anomalies. No obvious dark arts signatures. He frowned, vanished, and reappeared at the rim of a deeper ravine. Here the air tasted of sulfur and rot. Wolf Soul Summon. He sent wolves forward again. This pack shimmered and then dispersed, melting into the forest like mist. Time stretched on in tight, patient silence. All afternoon, the information he gathered was piecemeal and faint. There were traces, faint tremors of bowtruckles, the lurking malice of boggarts, hints of werewolf and vampire activity, but nothing with a clear direction to follow. Sargeras did not relent. He blinked across the primeval wood again and again, appearing where his senses would be most useful. Beside the knotted heart of an oak, at the bank of a stream glowing with faint magic, at the edge of a black mire that gave off a sour, dangerous aura. He ran different detection magics in turn, trace revealing, soul tracing, magic echo, each syncing without a trace. He examined likely caves and ruined sites, probing nodes of concentrated magic. Beyond a few nests of low-level dark creatures and a handful of long-abandoned magical traps, he found nothing. He stopped at the roots of a giant dead tree, and Trelawney's dreamlike words from the Hogwarts Christmas feast echoed in his mind. He was certain the prophecy had pointed to Pettigrew's journey to bring Nagini to Lord Voldemort. Either the prophecy had already been fulfilled, or the events were quietly unfolding somewhere in the forest. The place was vast, and Voldemort's means of concealment were likely subtle, parasitic within some living creature, hidden deep in an ancient ruin warded by powerful spells, or lying dormant beneath the soil in some strange form. Irritation flared. For a moment, a ruthless, efficient thought flashed through him. Set the forest ablaze, use pure destructive magic to burn the evil out and reduce whatever hid there to ash. As the killing impulse gathered, his perception snared a glimpse of pale, sacred light in a distant clearing. A small herd of unicorns bent to drink. Bowtruckles peered from hollow trees. Pixies danced around winter flowers. The forest itself had been innocent. It merely stood witness to the clash between light and darkness. A scorched earth solution would have destroyed its innocent dwellers along with any hidden enemy. He relaxed his grip on his wand and let the thought die. Beneath Albania's ancient roots, a shadow waited, drawing sustenance from darkness and patiently weaving the web of its return. This fleeting confrontation might be nothing more than a narrow reprieve. Sargeras merged into the forest's shadows and vanished without a trace. Chapter 238, The Gathering and Dobby's Request. The fruitless trip to Albania's dark forest left no trace of defeat on Sagres' face. He carried on with Hogwarts matters as if he'd only taken a short stroll through the trees. A few days later, when the cold winter stars pricked the night sky over the castle, he slipped out quietly. He passed through layers of ancient vines and thorns that parted like living things and arrived at a secluded safe house deep in the forbidden forest. Inside the house it was warm and cozy, insulated from the frost outside. A magically tended fire popped and crackled, releasing the faint, sharp scent of burning resin. Large, comfortable armchairs ringed the hearth. In one of them, Kestrel sat wrapped in a thick blanket with a steaming cup of hot chocolate. Her face was still a little pale, but she looked much better than before. Hummingbird sat close by, speaking in low, steady tones. On the other side of the fire, several figures sat in the shadows, silent until Sagres entered and took the last empty chair. He scanned the room and settled his gaze on Lumina. "Kestrel, how's your recovery? Can you try a location divination for a specific target?" he asked. Lumina set her cup down. Her playful smile faded to something more serious. "A location divination? Weren't we talking about interpreting prophecies?" "I already have a general understanding of the prophecy's content," Sagres said. "Who is the target you want to divine?" "Lord Voldemort." The name dropped like ice in the room. Lumina's gray eyes darkened with solemnity. "That's very difficult, extremely difficult. Pinpointing a specific individual, especially a powerful dark wizard like him, requires very strict conditions and the right mediums." She explained, "The most effective medium is bloodline. A direct blood bond is the clearest and hardest to conceal beacon. Parents locating children, or children locating parents, this connection, born of life itself, is the strongest anchor in prophetic magic." Sagres listened without disappointment. "Understood," he said. Then casually, "When will you be discharged?" Hummingbird answered for her. "If treatment goes smoothly and there are no setbacks, she should be discharged in 3 weeks, but full recovery will take longer." "Very good." Sagres turned his attention to the others in the shadows. "Anything else? Nightingale?" Nightingale's cool voice came from the dimness. "An antidote? None." She spread her hands flat. "The potion's composition is too fiendish to reverse engineer right now. That said," she shifted tone, "I did successfully replicate its brewing process. If anyone needs it, I'll provide it free of charge." The room stiffened for a moment. Kestrel paused mid-sip, and Hummingbird's brow creased. Robin's resentful voice piped up immediately. "In that case, I'd like some." Her fingers drummed on the armchair leather. "For my dear superior, that fool has been dumping all his work on me lately and foisting his useless nephew, who can't even manage a proper cleaning charm, onto me as a supervisee." Her contempt was obvious, and everyone laughed. Sagres smiled and looked to Snowy Owl. "Snowy Owl, what about the 5-legged monster?" "I didn't sell it," she said indifferently. "Either buyers offered too little or their backgrounds were too risky. Not worth it." but I'll keep it. It's decorative." Her casual remark made the others shrink in their chairs. Thunderbird spoke in turn. "That metal wand, no leads. But I did manage to make a wand incorporating hair from the five-legged monster. I tested many woods. Chestnut paired best. It significantly amplifies curse magic. The effect is startling." Sagres then addressed Stork. "Any special developments in the wizarding world?" Stork's voice was steady. "Yes, in Britain." He went on. "The British ministry has been unusually active at the International Confederation of Wizards. Two main pushes. One, they're campaigning hard to host next year's Quidditch World Cup. Fudge wants to burnish his prestige. Two," he slowed for emphasis, "they're pushing to restart the Tri-Wizard tournament, which has been suspended. The location is very likely to be Hogwarts." "Tri-Wizard tournament?" Hummingbird repeated softly, skeptical. Sagres said calmly, "Fudge is likely trying to use a grand international event to distract from his domestic failures." Stork nodded. "Many members of the Confederation support it as a way to promote exchange and showcase the younger generation. There's a lot of interest, but also significant resistance. Fudge has poured huge resources into lobbying." "Has he succeeded?" Sagres asked. "Not yet," Stork replied. "There's agreement in some quarters, opposition in others, and Fudge is pushing aggressively." Sagres turned to Swift. "Swift, your father works at the ministry, doesn't he? I hear he's quite competent." Swift blinked. "Yes, is there a problem? Interested in going further?" Sagres asked. "Minister of Magic, perhaps?" Swift stared for a moment, then shook his head. "My father's happy where he is. He likes dealing with Muggle liaison work, so he waved the idea off." Sagres nodded. "What about you? Would you consider a political path?" "Me," Swift blurted. "I don't want to be stuck in an office all day." "All right, let me know if you change your mind, before I find a suitable candidate myself." Kestrel leaned her head toward him, hopeful. "What about me?" she asked. Sagres refused bluntly. "Clearly not a fit." Laughter followed. The gathering shifted into an exchange of intelligence and a quick assessment of the situation. Just as people were getting ready to leave, a hesitant voice came from a shadow near the hearth. "Noble, Mr. Greengrass?" Sagres looked toward the voice and saw a house elf clutching an old pillowcase, eyes wide with a mixture of hope and fear. "Dobby?" he said. Dobby shuffled forward, ears quivering. Dobby is very happy here, very safe, but Dobby is idle. Dobby wants to work. Dobby wants to work for great Mr. Greengrass. Dobby does not want to eat free meals." He drooped his ears. Please, Mr. Greengrass, does Dobby have any work? Dobby is very diligent, extremely diligent." Watching the elf's eager face, a faint warmth flickered behind Sagres' gray eyes. He paused for a moment before speaking. "I can grant you your freedom. You will not be bound to a particular master or a single place. You can go where you wish and do as you wish." Dobby's eyes clouded with confusion. "Freedom? Go anywhere?" "But Dobby does not know where to go. Dobby only wants a place to be useful." "Then find work to support yourself for the time being," Sagres said slowly. "Don't worry, I will call on you if I need help." Dobby nodded, a mixture of relief and disappointment on his face. His big eyes darted around, cautious but hopeful. Then can Dobby go work in the Hogwarts kitchens? Dobby heard there are many house elf friends there. Dobby likes to cook, likes to care for young wizards. Dobby promises to work hard and not disgrace Mr. Greengrass. He looked at Sagres anxiously, afraid of refusal. Sagres hesitated only a moment before nodding. "You may. The Hogwarts kitchens will welcome any diligent, kind house elf. I will inform Headmaster Dumbledore." "Oh, merciful, great Mr. Greengrass." Dobby exploded into joy, bouncing in his tiny enthusiasm. "Dobby thanks you. Dobby will go now. Dobby will be the best house elf in the Hogwarts kitchens." He spun once with glee, dipped into a deep, grateful bow, and with a small popping sound apparated away, no doubt straight to the castle kitchens. Chapter 239. A new instance has opened. Days later, the whistle of the Hogwarts Express cut through the castle's quiet, and the hallways filled with the laughter of returning students. The holiday was over. Life was pouring back into the ancient walls. On his desk, Sargeras studied several unrolled parchments covered in complex ancient runes and structural diagrams, his blueprints for a new dueling arena. That afternoon, a notice outlined in magical flames appeared on the announcement board in the Great Hall and drew every student's attention. Dueling arena, new challenges. Magic ruin exploration. Step into the dust of time, uncover lost mysteries. Scenes, ancient ruins, lost temple, rotate randomly. Challenges, ancient mechanisms, traps, and residual guardian magics. Objective, use counter curses, shield charms, and exploration spells flexibly to solve puzzles, avoid dangers, and reach the core area safely. Core test, breadth of spell mastery, on-the-spot adaptability, teamwork. Mode, team challenge, up to 5 players per team. Difficulty, medium to high, depending on team composition and exploration depth. Rewards, house points, dueling points, magical materials, unique spells. Below the notice was an exchange catalog listing long strings of magical ingredients and wondrous spells many students had never even heard of. Some items were sponsored by Snowy Owl. It was clear the sponsor had the means and a real dedication to education. The whole castle buzzed. Compared to straightforward arena combat, this new instant-style challenge, full of mystery and exploration, was far more appealing to most students. In corridors and common rooms, conversations turned to team strategies, guesses about what the ruins held, and the obscure spells each person knew. One of the first teams to enter was a pioneer group of upper-year students representing all 4 houses. Penelope Clearwater of Ravenclaw, Percy Weasley and Katie Bell of Gryffindor, Cedric Diggory of Hufflepuff, and Graham Montague of Slytherin. They stepped through the glowing portal, and the familiar dueling ground vanished. A dim, moss-strewn corridor opened before them, broken stone pillars looming like the ribs of some ruined beast. Damp, cold air heavy with dust, and the scent of old magic washed over them. Faded murals along the walls flickered faintly as if whispering stories from the past. "Whoa! Merlin's beard!" Katie cried, her wand tip casting a thin beam that revealed chessboard-like runes on the floor. "Don't step randomly," Penelope warned, eyes sweeping the walls and floor. "Those runes mark active traps. Step on the wrong square and you'll trigger stone golems or binding vines. We need revealing charms to find a safe path or deactivation charms to disable them." The team went to work. Cedric cautiously waved his wand. Hominum Revelio. Silver motes drifted from his wand and settled on the runes. Several flared a dangerous red. Percy pointed his wand and shouted, "Finite incantatum," dimming the glow on those squares. They moved on carefully, but the passage suddenly shuddered. With a rumble, the walls came to life and began to close in. "Impedimenta!" Katie fired. "Protego," Cedric responded. Cedric reacted first, conjuring a wide, solid silver barrier that pushed against the sliding stone. It held, but wavered under the grinding pressure. "Quick, find the mechanism or counter the spell," Percy called, scanning the walls. "There," Katie shouted, fingers pointing to a snake-shaped relief high in a corner. Its eyes were glowing. Montague acted without waiting and cast Confringo. The red light from the blast struck the snake's eye, but it only flickered, and the walls began closing faster. "Montague, don't use offensive spells," Percy barked. "That's the Guardian's core. A forced attack triggers countermeasures. Use a dispelling charm. Dispel it, don't destroy it." "Defodio," Penelope cried, sending a focused dispelling charm at the snake's eye. The light hit true. The walls hesitated, then slid aside with a reluctant grinding sound. The team let out a collective breath, sweat beading on foreheads. Deeper in, the challenges escalated. Animated statues floated and fired spell fragments that Percy and Cedric knocked back with coordinated impedimenta. A hall filled with hallucinogenic mist disoriented Katie until Penelope cast Ventus to disperse it, and Cedric used Renervate to steady her. A massive stone door, carved with complex runes, demanded that all 5 simultaneously decipher and cast different counter curses to open it, a test of communication that forced Montague to temper his impatience and follow Penelope's directions. At last, an ancient guardian spirit materialized, exuding a chilling aura. Penelope recognized the warding. It required specific calming charms or potent expulsion spells for dark creatures. None of them knew those exact incantations. They had to stop and withdraw. The instance was full of ancient traps and residual magic. Rote textbook counter curses weren't enough. Students had to quickly identify magic types, binding, animation, curses, elemental illusion, and apply or combine the proper countermeasures. Protection had to be adaptive. Threats arrived from any direction and in many forms: physical impact, magical beams, poisonous fog, psychic shock. One simple shield charm wouldn't suffice. They had to switch between focused Protego, energy deflection, area protections, or execute rapid evasions depending on the threat. Exploration spells were indispensable. Hominum Revelio could reveal hidden guardian spirits or missing teammates. Control over the intensity of Lumos could circumvent light-sensitive traps. These once theoretical spells became matters of survival. The 5-player limit forced clear divisions of labor. Reconnaissance and deciphering usually fell to Ravenclaws. Defense often came from Hufflepuffs. Healing and status clearing were Hufflepuff strengths, sometimes Slytherin. Powerful offensive work tended to be Gryffindor and Slytherin. And every team needed a level-headed commander who could make quick decisions, someone from any house. Poor communication or acting alone usually meant collective elimination. When teams emerged from the arena after a successful run, they were disheveled but exhilarated, faces flushed with pride. Failed teams gathered together, arguing over mistakes and planning improvements, eager to try again. Talk of the ruin exploration spread through the castle. Books on ancient runes, counter curses, and protective magic flew off the shelves in the library, and clusters of students practiced coordinated casting in common rooms. Houses mixed and matched more than ever. To survive the ruins, members had to blend their strengths, clash, and eventually learn to cooperate under pressure. Sagres appeared in the audience from time to time. He watched the young wizards struggle, cooperate, and grow within the scenarios he'd designed, noting how they used newly learned spells to overcome traps and puzzles. A faint satisfaction occasionally crossed his face. He watched not only for raw power, but for those who could think, adapt, and function in a team. Talents that might become allies in the long fight ahead. Daily life at Hogwarts went on. Quidditch practices, classes, and ordinary routines. But in the dueling arena's ancient ruins, a process intended to shape the future had quietly begun. Chapter 240, each shows his special power staff room. "I must say, Sagres," Professor McGonagall said, setting down her papers and pushing up her glasses, "this magic ruin exploration design is ingenious. It's done wonders for getting students to practice applied magic. Thank goodness some of those dusty library books are finally being used." "You're absolutely right. The results have been impressive," Flitwick agreed in his high, excited voice, practically bouncing in his chair. "My Ravenclaws came back talking about those intricate ancient rune puzzles with stars in their eyes. It's fantastic for training logical thinking and combined spell work. But," he rubbed his hands, a little embarrassed and eager, "Sagres, could future ruin rotations include sections focused on precise spell control? Like an array of floating stone slabs that requires exact magical output to pass, or crystalline clusters that respond only to a particular frequency of lumos? I have plenty of ideas." Sagres inclined his head. "Precision is a core skill. It can certainly be included." From the darker corner of the room came a low, almost contemptuous snort. "Besides that?" Professor Snape's voice was cold and flat. Sagres turned to him. "Professor Snape, do you want to teach a bunch of students to wave their wands foolishly?" Snape said. "Showy magic won't save them from poisonous mists or corrosive brews." Sagres smiled slightly. "What do you propose?" Snape's dark eyes swept him over, assessing. "Ruins will have residues, potions broken down by time or leaked magic, or traps that require specific antidotes. Pure counterspells aren't always the answer." Sagres' smile didn't change. "So you'd like potion knowledge added to the trials?" Snape blinked, as if surprised Sagres had understood so readily. He pinched the bridge of his nose. "Yes. Can we include scenarios that force students to identify magical potion residues, analyze them, and in some cases concoct temporary neutralizers, or use particular potion properties to solve mechanisms?" "That makes sense," Sagres said. "We can build in elements that require identifying and neutralizing potion-related hazards. I'll consult you on the specific designs." Snape's lips tightened. He had expected resistance, not this quick agreement, especially the word consult. He gave a constrained nod. "I will compile some educational formulas and scenario concepts." "Perfect." Sagres appeared pleased. The other professors hid small smiles or muffled laughter. The doorway burst open a heartbeat later as Hagrid's enormous form squeezed in. "Professor Sagres! Professor Greengrass!" The students were dealing with those flying stone statues. "Blast it, it was brilliant." "We were just discussing improvements," Sagres said calmly. You're welcome to share your ideas. Hagrid beamed, fussing at his beard. How could any real ancient ruin be without magical creatures? Think, sleeping treasure guardians wake when magic's about, or little chaotic creatures, harmless but mischievous. Nifflers could sniff out a golden key for the next stage. That's an excellent suggestion. Sargeras kept his tone even. Do you have particular examples? The book you gave me for Christmas, Ancient Magical Creature Habitats, has loads, Hagrid gushed. Sargeras was silent for a moment. Putting live creatures into an instance was risky, and many of the beasts in that book were aggressive, even lethal. Still, he didn't dismiss the idea. Magical creature elements will require meticulous safeguards. I'll design several unique modules, some as optional encounters or hidden areas deep within the ruins. Hagrid's face lit up like a child's. Then can we include ancient rune analysis? Bathsheba babbling asked, hopeful. Of course, Sargeras replied. The current ruin exploration already touches on runes. That's wonderful, Bathsheba said, smiling and winking. I'd like the students to learn something useful, so I don't feel my teaching went to waste. Professor Sprout took the chance to unveil a crate of plants she'd been preparing, chomping cabbages from China, mandrakes, tentacula, devil's snare, Mimbulus mimbletonia, puffopods, and fungi bombs. A few faculty members winced at the more volatile specimens, others chuckled at Sprout's obvious delight. Everyone's ideas are extremely valuable, Sargeras said, putting away the enchanted parchment and quill that had been recording the meeting. He looked around the room. But the core of this instance is assessment and training. Since each of you has an area of expertise and is willing to help, I have a suggestion. He paused, then continued. Why don't we establish a more comprehensive scoring system? A scoring system? McGonagall asked, instantly intrigued. Yes, Sargeras explained. The instance will have a basic team score to reflect overall performance. On top of that, we'll have specialized scores that each professor can claim and administer. He outlined the plan clearly. Professor Flitwick can create a precise spell control score to evaluate precision, fine control, and creative combined spell work. Professor Snape can set a potion response score to assess students' ability to identify potion residues, analyze components, and use potion knowledge under pressure. Professor McGonagall can have a transfiguration score to judge mastery and application. And Professor Lupin can devise a dark arts defense score to measure defensive skill and composure under hostile enchantments. These specialized scores will be independent of the basic team score, serving as additional assessment references, Sargeras finished. They'll give a clearer picture of individual strengths and help us identify candidates for roles, potion assistants, top spellcasters, future prefects, and so on. The proposal sparked an animated discussion. Heads nodded, pens scratched, and ideas blossomed as each professor considered how they might test their domain. Even Dumbledore smiled and inclined his head. A most stimulating proposal, Sargeras, for both professors and students.